Hi everybody. Tonight I invite you to join me on a journey not of haste or fear, but one of quiet wonder, a gentle drift into the heart of a centuries-old mystery that has whispered its name across the tides of history, the Bermuda Triangle. This is a tale of strange vanishings, of ghostly ships, and of soft-spoken enigmas that stir the waters of the Atlantic. Ours will not be a voyage of alarms and shrill voices, but rather a slow unfolding of events, like the soft turning of a worn and ancient page, beneath a canopy of stars and an endless ocean sky. The Bermuda Triangle. Its name conjures images of mysterious seas and vanished vessels, a vast expanse of water, shaped more by the stories told about it than by its borders on a map. It stretches, loosely defined, between the soft shores of Miami, the quiet coasts of Bermuda, and the sun-kissed islands of Puerto Rico. And though the waves roll on as they do in any other part of the world, it is here that countless stories have settled like mist upon the waters. Stories of ships that never arrived, planes that melted into the sky, and travellers whose last words faded into static before the silence swallowed them whole. Long before sailors crossed these waters under flags of Spain or England, long before the hum of engines and the cutting wake of steamships, the people of these islands spoke quietly of the sea's strange humours. The Lucayan people of the Bahamas, gentle seafarers who knew the ocean as both a provider and a mystery, whispered of glowing lights that danced beneath the waves on moonless nights. They spoke of whirlpools, silent, yawning mouths in the sea, that opened suddenly, swallowing canoes, fish, and even the air itself, leaving behind only the soft ripple of disturbed water. Theirs were stories shared in the hush of night, beside slow-burning fires, meant not to frighten, but to honour the unseen forces of the deep. When the ships of Europe first traced cautious lines across these waters in the 15th and 16th centuries, those ancient whispers found new ears. Christopher Columbus, on his first voyage westward in 1492, noted in his weathered logbooks the strangeness of the sea. His compass, he recorded, spun without cause, its needle restless as though stirred by an unseen hand. On a calm night, with the stars laid out like soft lanterns upon velvet, he witnessed a strange light, a sudden, glowing flame that arched silently across the sky and vanished into the ocean's quiet embrace. He wrote not of terror, but of wonder, and perhaps of a silent question that hung in the air long after the light had gone. As centuries turned and the sails of explorers gave way to the sturdy hum of steamships, the triangle's soft whispers grew no louder, yet no fainter. Ships passed through without incident, until they did not. Some vanished beneath clear skies, leaving no debris, no cry for help, only an absence that settled like a soft fog over the hearts of those waiting ashore. One such vessel was the USS Cyclops. In 1918, this massive ship departed Barbados with over 300 souls aboard, a collier, strong and steady, built to bear the heavy burden of manganese ore across the Atlantic. Her captain, seasoned and sure, guided her into the open sea under skies that promised fair passage. But the Cyclops never reached her destination. No distress signal, no fragments of wreckage, nothing. As though the ocean, with a slow and silent hand, had drawn her into its depths and closed the surface above her like a soft curtain. The years moved gently on. In December of 1945, another chapter unfolded, one now murmured through the soft corridors of naval history. Flight 19, a group of 5 US Navy bombers lifted gracefully into the air for a routine training flight from Fort Lauderdale. The sea was calm, the sky a pale, endless blue. Hours later, their voices drifted back to base, soft with confusion. The commander's voice came across the radio, muted, puzzled. "We are entering white water. Everything is strange. We can't be sure of our direction." His words grew softer, more uncertain, and then silence. A rescue mission launched. A Martin Mariner seaplane, crewed by 13 men, ascended into the soft hush of the afternoon sky. It, too, disappeared, vanishing without a trace into the same serene air and sea. By nightfall, 27 men had slipped beyond reach, their fate a quiet echo in the vast emptiness where sea meets sky. And so the legend took root, not as a tale of sudden storms or violent seas, but as a soft pattern repeating over years and decades of things simply ceasing to be. Some spoke of magnetic fields gone awry, areas where compasses spun as if searching for a truth they could not find. Others whispered of sudden storms, born in an instant, flashing their fury before vanishing without a trace. And there were those, in quiet conversations over flickering tavern candles, who wondered if the Bermuda Triangle marked a place where the veil between worlds wore thin, a soft threshold where things might simply slip away. Our story tonight will follow these gentle, haunting threads. We will drift softly between the lines of fact and whisper, feeling the slow pull of the unknown, letting its quiet curiosity carry us through the shadows of the Triangle's mysteries. This is not a tale we seek to solve, nor a riddle we rush to answer. Instead, it is a soft unfolding, a slow voyage alongside the silent disappearances that have lingered in the hearts of sailors, aviators, and dreamers. So close your eyes if you wish. Let your thoughts rest gently upon the slow waves of this story as we begin our quiet journey into the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, a place where silence speaks softly and the unknown waits patiently beneath the hush of the sea. On a morning touched with the soft golden hues of dawn, a ship known as the Rosalie prepared to sail from the quiet harbour of Havana. It was the year 1840, and the Caribbean breeze played gently with the sails as the crew made ready for the short voyage to France. The Rosalie was a fine merchant vessel, her wooden hull seasoned by countless crossings, her sails kissed by many winds. Laden with cargo and expectation, she departed under the soft gaze of a watchful sun, slipping past the headlands with barely a ripple in her wake. Days passed, and as the calendar turned its quiet page, no word came. But such silences were not uncommon on the high seas. In those years, communication was carried only by the slow hands of time and tide. Yet when the Rosalie was found adrift days later, sails unfurled, her decks hauntingly empty, the whispers began. She was discovered by another vessel, the Ellen Austin, a ship known among sailors for her stout build and capable crew. The Rosalie floated upon calm seas, her sails billowing softly in the mild breeze. As the boarding party climbed over her rail, their footsteps echoing in the hollow quiet, they found no sign of struggle, no broken glass, no torn sails, no scattered cargo. The ship lay as though waiting for her crew to return. The tables in her cabin remained set, untouched, meals resting cold on the plates. The logs were open but unfinished, the last entry written in a hand that betrayed no hint of trouble. The cargo, too, remained in place, untouched by thief or storm, but of her crew there was nothing. No sign of life, no trace of departure. The ship's boats hung untouched upon their davits, the rigging undisturbed. The Rosalie drifted, a silent ghost upon a gentle sea. The Ellen Austin, after a thorough search, made the decision to take the Rosalie in tow, intending to bring her safely into port. Yet, as they began their quiet journey together, a sudden mist fell over the sea, an unnatural hush blanketing the waters. The Rosalie, tethered and calm, followed obediently in the wake of the Ellen Austin. Then, as the mist lifted, the crew of the Ellen Austin watched in quiet disbelief as the Rosalie vanished before their eyes. Not with a crash or a storm, but with a silent, gentle fade into the horizon, as though she had never been there at all. Hours turned to days, and the Rosalie was found once more, adrift, empty, untouched. The Ellen Austin, ever determined, attempted again to guide her back. A prize crew was placed aboard, men chosen for their steadiness and resolve. They set sail, the two ships moving together across a calm and open sea. But once again the mist descended, soft, silent, almost tender in its embrace, and when it cleared, the Rosalie was gone. No wreckage, no cries, only the soft murmur of the sea, as though it had gently claimed the vessel in a quiet moment unseen. Those who searched found her days later, floating aimlessly, empty once more. The prize crew was never seen again. Their names, like so many whispered into the hush of the Bermuda winds, vanished into soft obscurity. Such stories, whispered from sailor to sailor, grew like soft tendrils in the quiet hours of night watches. They spoke of a sea that did not rage, but invited, an embrace that did not snatch, but gently took, and the Rosalie became another name upon the long list of those who had crossed into the soft unknown. The mystery deepened with each telling, not through dramatics or screams, but in the quiet repetition of the impossible made ordinary. Ships did not vanish in storms or in battle. They slipped away in calm waters under clear skies, in moments when no eye saw, when no heart suspected. The sea beneath the Bermuda Triangle seemed a place apart, a realm of soft contradictions where the expected dissolved gently into the unknown. In the years that followed, captains altered their routes with a quiet caution. Old sea charts bore penciled notes along their margins, gentle warnings, not official, not loud, but marked with a sailor's respect for unseen dangers. "Water's uncertain," they wrote. "Proceed with care." And even as steamships carved their steady way through these seas, the whispers did not fade. For every ship that sailed safely through, another left no word, no signal. Families waited on distant shores, their hearts listening for a message that would never come. The ocean, it seemed, kept its secrets wrapped softly in the folds of its endless waves. The Bermuda Triangle did not rage, did not shout. It waited, and when it took, it did so with the quiet grace of a shadow slipping over water, so softly that one could almost believe it had never been there at all. And so the legend of the Rosalie joined the soft choir of vanished ships, her story another note in the long haunting melody that drifted across the seas. A melody not of terror, but of quiet mystery, a lullaby sung by the waves themselves, in a language only the heart could understand. We sail forward now, gentle listener, carried by this soft current of stories, into the silent corridors of the Triangle's endless enigma, where the sea speaks not in storms, but in soft disappearances that stir the soul and leave only whispers in their wake. The year was 1881, when another vessel entered the silent embrace of the Bermuda Triangle. A vessel whose story would join the quiet murmur of legends whispered by seafarers long after her timbers had vanished beneath the waves. She was called the Ellen Austin, a stout American schooner, known in shipping circles for her steadfast voyages and the skill of her captain, a man respected not only for his command of the sea, but for his unwavering calm in the face of its many moods. On a voyage from London to New York, the Ellen Austin sailed into the Atlantic under fair skies and steady winds. The crew moved with practiced ease, their routines as familiar as the steady rocking of the ship beneath their feet. The sea offered no hint of trouble, no angry skies, no restless waves. But the Bermuda Triangle has never been a realm of loud alarms. Its mysteries arrive on soft tides, cloaked in the everyday. It was in the open sea, well within the hazy borders of the Triangle, that the crew of the Ellen Austin sighted something peculiar. On the horizon, a ship drifted silently, a schooner like their own, her sails full yet moving without direction, a phantom gliding across the water's soft skin. Curious, and bound by the unwritten laws of the sea, Captain Baker ordered the Ellen Austin to close in. As they neared, the crew watched with quiet unease. The ship showed no sign of distress. Her sails, though weathered, were intact. Her rigging hung in order. The sea around her lay calm, reflecting the soft shimmer of a high sun, and yet no one moved upon her deck. A boarding party was sent over, their voices low as they clambered aboard the drifting vessel. They moved softly across her wooden planks, their boots making gentle echoes in the hollow stillness. Cabins were searched, holds inspected. Every inch of the ship bore the same haunting truth. The vessel was utterly deserted. No blood, no signs of struggle, no hurried departures. Her cargo remained untouched, her supplies in order. It was as though her crew had simply walked into the air and vanished, leaving the ship to glide silently onward. Captain Baker, a man not given to superstition, made a decision in keeping with the pragmatism of a seasoned mariner. He ordered a prize crew, trusted sailors from the Ellen Austin, to take control of the derelict and sail her alongside to New York. The sea was calm, the winds gentle. It seemed, in the soft clarity of daylight, the logical choice. And so they set out, two ships now moving as companions upon the broad Atlantic, the Ellen Austin and the silent schooner. The prize crew, aboard the mysterious vessel, maintained steady contact with the main ship, signalling regularly as they moved together through the soft swells of the sea. But then, as so many tales of the Triangle begin, the mist came. Not a storm, not a tempest. A soft, grey veil that descended upon the waters without warning, wrapping both ships in a quiet shroud. The world shrank to a whisper of fog and dim light. The sailors called softly across the narrowing gap between vessels, calls that grew fainter, swallowed by the hush of the mist. When the fog lifted, the Ellen Austin's crew scanned the horizon. The schooner was gone. The sea stretched out, serene and empty. No wreckage, no splintered wood, no fading sail in the distance. The ship, and with her the prize crew, had vanished without a sound, as though the mist had drawn them gently away and folded them into its soft embrace. Captain Baker, refusing to yield to fear, ordered a search. The Ellen Austin scoured the seas, tracing slow, deliberate circles beneath skies that remained curiously calm. Hours turned into days. Then, as quietly as she had vanished, the schooner reappeared, adrift once more, her sails fluttering lazily in the gentle wind. Again a boarding party approached, hearts thudding softly beneath steady exteriors. They found the ship empty, the prize crew gone. No sign of struggle, no trace of departure. The ship drifted in mute silence, bearing only the echo of the men who had tried to claim her. A second prize crew, braver or perhaps more determined, was placed aboard. This time tighter watch was kept, signals arranged with care. Yet as the ship set sail once more, the mist returned, creeping gently over the sea like a soft hand drawn across the face of the waters. And when it cleared, the schooner had disappeared again. The Ellen Austin searched, again and again, each time finding only the empty, drifting ghost of a ship that refused to be guided, refused to yield its mystery. The fate of the crews that boarded her remained unknown, men swallowed by a silent enigma taken not by storm or battle, but by something quieter, something softer, and perhaps far more unsettling. The story of the Ellen Austin became a soft-spoken legend among sailors, a reminder that the sea, especially within the Bermuda Triangle, holds its own quiet truths. It did not scream its warnings, nor flash its threats. It merely took, with a patience and a calm that defied understanding. The tale became a soft thread in the great tapestry of maritime mysteries, woven alongside others who had slipped into silence beneath clear skies and gentle seas. It whispered through dockside taverns and among the murmurs of shipboard night watches, growing softer with each retelling, yet never fading entirely. And thus, the Ellen Austin sailed on, her story a lingering shadow on the soft horizon of the unknown, another gentle ripple upon the vast silent ocean that is the Bermuda Triangle. Our journey continues, deeper now, into the heart of this silent sea, where mysteries drift like soft echoes, waiting to be heard beneath the hush of night. The sea stretched endlessly before them, a shimmering expanse of gentle swells beneath a sky brushed with the soft hues of an Atlantic morning. It was 1921, and the Carol A. Deering, a 5-masted schooner of elegant build, sailed with purpose from the coast of Rio de Janeiro, her cargo holds heavy with coal bound for the harbours of Virginia. She was a ship admired for her grace upon the water, her sails catching the wind like silent wings as she made her steady way northward. Commanded by Captain William H. Merritt, a veteran of the seas, the voyage began with the soft hum of routine. Yet before long, Captain Merritt fell ill, a sudden, quiet affliction that forced him to disembark in Barbados. Command of the ship passed to Captain Willis B. Wormel, another seasoned mariner known for his calm authority and deep knowledge of the Atlantic's gentle and merciless ways. With him at the helm, the Deering continued her voyage, her sails swelling against the soft breath of the trade winds. As days gave way to weeks, the schooner moved steadily along the eastern seaboard of the United States, nearing her destination. Yet as she entered the waters near Cape Hatteras, known among sailors as the graveyard of the Atlantic, something shifted, something subtle and unsettling. On January 28th, a lightship stationed near the Diamond Shoals sighted the Carol A. Deering passing nearby. The captain of the lightship observed her through the soft haze of morning and noted something peculiar. A man, not the captain, appeared on deck and hailed the lightship. His words, carried faintly across the gentle water, were a request for a tow. A request made in an unfamiliar accent, delivered with an odd, hurried air. The lightship's keeper noted that the man seemed uneasy, his manner abrupt. Yet the seas remained calm, the sky bright, and the schooner sailed on. The encounter lingered in the keeper's thoughts, a soft question pressing at the edge of his mind. 2 days later, on the last morning of January, the Carol A. Deering was found aground on Diamond Shoals. Her bow pressed into the soft sandbanks, her sails flapping softly in the wind, the ship appeared deserted. A boarding party sent by the Coast Guard approached, the soft lap of the sea against their boat the only sound in the crisp morning air. Upon boarding, they found a haunting scene. The Deering stood empty, her decks devoid of life, her cabins silent. The ship's lifeboats were gone, vanished along with the crew. Yet the galley showed signs of recent use, the meals prepared but untouched, as if the crew had departed in a sudden, silent hurry. Charts lay scattered, the ship's log missing, along with the navigation equipment. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no evidence of violence. The ship, despite running aground, bore no significant damage. The lifeboat's absence and the missing logbook offered soft hints but no answers. The sea remained calm, the skies clear, a morning like any other, save for the silent, empty vessel grounded upon the shoals. Investigators scoured the ship, sifting through every quiet corner, seeking a clue among the gentle shadows of her cabins and holds. The names of the missing crew were spoken in soft voices, men with families, with hopes, with lives suddenly folded into the hush of mystery. But the ocean gave no reply. Theories floated quietly among those who pondered the fate of the Carol A. Deering. Some whispered of mutiny, a crew unhappy under new command, seeking escape into the vast freedom of the sea. Others spoke of piracy, though no signs of theft or struggle lay upon the ship's decks. And there were those who wondered if something older, deeper, had reached softly from the unseen edges of the triangle and drawn the crew away. An unseen force wrapped not in fury, but in the calm embrace of the unknown. The lifeboats, like the men who had filled them, were never found. The ocean absorbed them into its vast, soft silence, leaving only questions adrift upon its endless surface. In the years that followed, the story of the Carol A. Deering wove itself gently into the fabric of maritime legend. She became another silent name whispered in the corridors of naval academies and in the soft conversations of sailors watching the horizon. Her fate remained a quiet enigma, a ghostly question floating forever in the soft air of the Atlantic breeze. Unlike tales of violent storms or desperate cries for help, her story settled softly upon the heart, a mystery not marked by drama but by the stillness of its unfolding. A ship vanished into silence, her crew slipping like shadows into the soft embrace of a waiting sea. And thus the Carol A. Deering joined the long procession of vessels touched by the quiet mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. Her name forever part of the silent litany spoken by the waves, carried gently across the waters of a sea that keeps its secrets with a calm patience beyond human grasp. As we drift further into this soft-spoken narrative, we begin to sense the gentle pattern emerging, a series of disappearances marked not by chaos but by an almost reverent stillness. The triangle takes not in fury, but with a quiet hand, a soft whisper beneath the endless sky. Our journey continues, sailing ever deeper into the silent heart of this enduring mystery, where each story blends softly into the next, like gentle waves merging upon the vast, unseen currents of the deep. The year was 1948, a time when the world, still trembling in the aftershocks of a great war, sought solace in the steady hum of passenger flights and the quiet promise of peaceful skies. Aviation had become a symbol of progress, a gentle bridge between distant lands. It was in this hopeful dawn of modern travel that the Star Tiger, a British Avro Tudor 4 airliner, prepared for her journey across the Atlantic. She lifted gently from the runway at Santa Maria in the Azores on the 30th of January, her silver fuselage gleaming faintly in the soft morning light. Aboard were 25 souls, passengers and crew, who looked out upon the soft horizon, perhaps thinking of loved ones awaiting them in Bermuda. Captain Brian W. McMillan, a man of seasoned calm and trusted skill, guided the Star Tiger into the soft embrace of the sky, her engines humming a steady lullaby against the hush of the upper air. The weather was favourable, though a low-pressure system drifted near their route. Yet nothing, it seemed, that would trouble a sturdy craft piloted by experienced hands. The Star Tiger maintained her course, radioing brief updates to the ground, a soft thread of human connection stretched thin across the vast Atlantic. As night fell gently over the sea, the air grew cool, the world below slipping into darkness. Captain McMillan's last communication came softly through the ether at 3:15 a.m., calm and routine. A position report, his voice composed, without the slightest tremor of concern. Bermuda lay not far ahead. The flight was proceeding as planned. And then, silence. No distress signal. No sign of trouble. The Star Tiger simply vanished. The morning sun rose upon a restless sea, and search efforts began. aircraft and ships scouring the ocean's surface with steady precision. But no trace of the airliner was found. No wreckage floated upon the soft waves, no life raft, no oil slick. It was as though the Star Tiger and all aboard had been gently erased from the sky. Investigators, poring over flight plans, weather charts and mechanical records, found no explanation that satisfied both reason and heart. The aircraft was well maintained, the crew capable and composed. The weather, though imperfect, posed no threat that night to a plane such as the Star Tiger. The mystery hung softly in the air, unanswered, a question poised upon the lips of the wind. The public, drawn quietly into the unfolding enigma, read the reports with a mixture of curiosity and unease. There were no cries of panic, only a lingering, silent wonder. How could a great machine, and 25 souls, slip so completely beyond the reach of a world now woven with radio waves and searchlights? And yet the sky gave no reply. Barely a year passed before the Atlantic whispered again. In January of 1949, the Star Ariel, sister ship to the Star Tiger, prepared for her journey from Bermuda to Kingston, Jamaica. Like her predecessor, the Star Ariel carried passengers across the gentle skies of the Atlantic, a promise of safe passage wrapped in the quiet confidence of modern flight. Captain John Clutha McPhee, experienced and calm, took the Star Ariel into the sky under clear, sunlit skies. The weather, by all accounts, was near perfect, an open blue vault stretching in every direction. The radio logs marked each update with quiet precision. The Star Ariel flew true, her course steady. At 9:42 a.m, a final routine transmission was made, reporting position and altitude. Captain McPhee's voice, clear and untroubled, faded gently from the radio waves. After that, nothing. The search began swiftly, vessels and aircraft sweeping wide arcs across the sea, tracing the last known position of the Star Ariel. Yet again, the ocean offered no clue, no soft echo of the aircraft's passing, no debris, no signals, only the quiet pulse of the sea beneath an endless sky. 2 airliners, 2 years apart, both vanished without warning, without trace, upon the soft, shifting airways of the Atlantic, both within the quiet reaches of the Bermuda Triangle. Speculation moved quietly through the corridors of aviation circles and into the public imagination. Some wondered at the possibility of sudden mechanical failure, though no faults had been found in either aircraft. Others considered the hand of sabotage or unseen weather phenomena. And among the soft-spoken murmurs, some questioned if there might be places in the world where the fabric of reality itself grew thin, where things and people might slip quietly away. But the Bermuda Triangle did not roar. It did not rage. It remained, as always, soft in its silence, an expanse where vanishings happened not with fury, but with an unsettling calm, as though part of a pattern woven by unseen hands. The twin disappearances of the Star Tiger and Star Ariel joined the gentle procession of mysteries bound to this stretch of sea and sky, a procession marked by soft questions, never by firm answers. They became another verse in the soft, endless song of the Triangle, a song that drifts upon the winds and slips beneath the waves, forever unresolved. And so we continue, carried forward by this quiet current of stories, deeper into the soft folds of the Bermuda Triangle's mysteries, where silence holds sway and the unknown waits, patient and calm, beneath the endless, listening sky. The morning of December 5th, 1945, arrived in Fort Lauderdale with a soft Atlantic breeze brushing gently against the palm-lined runways of the Naval Air Station. The sky stretched clear and pale overhead, the kind of sky that promised a simple, uneventful day. At the heart of the bustling airfield, a group of young aviators prepared for a routine training mission, a navigational exercise across the familiar waters of the Florida coast and the open Atlantic beyond. The mission was designated Flight 19. The 5 aircraft chosen for the exercise were Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, sturdy, reliable warplanes that had served with distinction during the Second World War. Their dark fuselages bore the scuffs of previous missions, yet they stood gleaming in the morning sun, engines purring softly as the crews made final checks. At the head of the formation stood Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, an experienced flight instructor and decorated combat veteran. Taylor was respected for his calm under pressure, his confidence in the cockpit, and his deep familiarity with both the aircraft and the coastal routes they would be flying that day. At exactly 2:10 p.m., the 5 Avengers lifted smoothly into the sky, their propellers cutting rhythmic patterns in the clear afternoon air. They banked gently eastward, heading out over the Atlantic, their wings glinting faintly against the sunlit waters below. The first leg of the flight was a simple eastern course, a standard run over the sea before a long northerly leg, followed by a final leg westward that would return them safely to base. It was an exercise these men had flown countless times, a familiar pattern traced over a friendly sky. But as the afternoon deepened, the first faint whispers of unease drifted over the radio waves. At approximately 3:40 p.m., Lieutenant Taylor's voice crackled across the frequency. "This is FT-28. We seem to have gotten off course. We cannot see land. Repeat, we cannot see land." The message arrived with a calm tone, lacking the edge of fear, yet threaded with a quiet confusion that stirred attention at the air station. The radio operator responded, requesting Taylor's position. There was a pause before Taylor's voice returned, softer now. "We can't be sure where we are. Everything looks strange. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should." The reports puzzled the flight controllers. The weather remained clear. Visibility was good. There was no sign of any atmospheric disturbance that could explain the strange visual disorientation the pilots described. Yet as the minutes passed, the situation grew more peculiar. Taylor reported that both his compasses, standard and backup, were malfunctioning, giving conflicting readings. Despite his experience, he admitted with quiet uncertainty that he could not determine which direction was west. As the flight continued its slow, uncertain path, the other pilots began transmitting their own observations, voices carrying a soft note of growing doubt. One remarked that they believed they were over the Florida Keys, yet Taylor insisted they were over the Gulf of Mexico. The flight drifted, circling in confused patterns as the commanders on the ground tried in vain to guide them back. At 4 p.m., Taylor's voice came again. "We're heading north, then east. If we don't hit land soon, we'll have to ditch." Still, the skies remained calm. The sea below mirrored the soft gold of the lowering sun. There was no storm, no battle, nothing but a flight of trained men growing quietly lost in an expanse they knew well. By 5 p.m., radio signals grew faint. The air station strained to make out Taylor's words. His final clear transmission came at 6:20 p.m. "All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." And then, nothing. No distress beacon, no emergency transmission. The 5 planes carrying 14 men vanished into the soft veil of the Atlantic twilight. The Navy's response was immediate. A Martin PBM Mariner flying boat designed for long-range search and rescue missions was dispatched less than 20 minutes later, carrying a crew of 13. The Mariner lifted gracefully into the darkening sky, its engines humming a low, steady song against the hush of the coming night. But the Mariner, too, disappeared. A nearby tanker, SS Gaines Mills, reported seeing a sudden flash of fire in the distance, a brief, silent bloom of light in the night sky. The ship sailed toward the location, but no wreckage, no survivors, no trace of the Mariner was found. It had joined Flight 19 in the same strange, silent vanishing. In the days that followed, an unprecedented search operation unfolded. Over 300 aircraft and dozens of ships scoured the waters, combing more than 250,000 square miles of ocean. The search stretched from the warm shallows of the Florida coast to the wide open Atlantic. Yet the sea remained soft in its silence. No life rafts, no wreckage, no oil slicks, not a single piece of evidence that could explain what had happened. The Navy's official investigation, detailed and thorough, offered no conclusive answer. The final report listed Taylor's last known position as unknown. A stark admission that even with the full might of the Navy's resources, the mystery could not be unraveled. Theories ranged from navigational error and compass malfunction to sudden weather anomalies. Yet none fully explained the quiet, complete disappearance of 6 aircraft and 27 men. The story of Flight 19 settled gently into the collective memory of a world fascinated by the silent enigmas of the sea and sky. It became a tale recounted softly among aviators, sailors, and those who watched the horizon with wondering eyes. The disappearance spoke not of chaos or catastrophe, but of a slow slipping away, a gentle vanishing beneath a sky that remained quiet and clear. The Bermuda Triangle had, once again, whispered softly into history, leaving behind only questions, only echoes. The sea did not rage, nor did the sky weep. It simply took. And so we drift further into the soft currents of this unfolding mystery, where the voices of the vanished linger like faint echoes upon the wind, and the silent embrace of the unknown awaits beyond the quiet horizon. The morning of July 1st, 1955, dawned with a quiet, golden softness over the Florida Straits. The sky stretched wide and pale, unmarred by storm clouds or winds. The sea beneath it lay calm, a vast expanse of silvery blue that moved with the slow, rhythmic breath of a summer morning. Upon these gentle waters sailed the freighter known as the Southern Districts, her modest hull pressing steadily through the mild swells as she made her routine voyage from Key West to Havana. She was not a vessel of grand renown, nor one given to fanfare. The Southern Districts was a workhorse of the coastal trade, her holds filled with mundane cargo, household goods, farming equipment, and general supplies bound for the markets and ports of Central America. Her journey was expected to be uneventful, a simple passage across familiar seas under the care of Captain George M. Farnsworth, a man respected for his quiet diligence and unshakable calm upon the water. The crew aboard the Southern Districts moved about their duties that morning with the easy confidence of men well versed in the gentle rhythms of maritime life. The sun rose slowly, casting a soft golden sheen upon the decks as the freighter pushed southward. The radios crackled with short, routine messages, position reports, weather updates, nothing out of the ordinary. At approximately 9:30 a.m., a message came through from Captain Farnsworth himself. The transmission was clear, calm, entirely mundane. The ship was making steady progress, the seas were smooth, and all systems aboard were functioning as expected. It was the kind of communication that would usually be forgotten within the hour, a simple reassurance that all was well on the quiet waters of the Florida Straits. But it would be the last anyone would ever hear from the Southern Districts. As the hours passed and the freighter drew closer to her expected position near Havana, the first subtle waves of concern began to ripple through the shipping community. The Southern Districts failed to check in. The radio remained silent. Other vessels plying nearby routes reached out across the airwaves, their calls hanging unanswered in the ether. By late afternoon, those quiet ripples had deepened into a soft, growing unease. The United States Coast Guard, alerted by the freighter's absence, initiated standard search procedures. Planes traced wide, looping arcs over the open water, their watchful eyes scanning the endless, shimmering sea. Ships altered course to join the search, their crews leaning over rails, scanning the horizon with a slow, methodical patience. What they found, 2 days later, was not the Southern Districts, but a silent remnant of her passing, a pair of lifeboats floating gently in the calm waters near the projected route of the missing freighter. They drifted quietly, their wooden hulls rising and falling with the soft breath of the sea. The boats bore no signs of damage, no scorch marks, no bullet holes, no trace of violence or struggle. They were simply there, empty, silent, alone. The scene was haunting in its simplicity. The lifeboats, designed to carry the crew to safety in the event of disaster, floated without passengers, their oars resting unused, their supplies untouched. The Southern Districts herself had vanished completely, no wreckage, no debris, no oil slick to mark her passing. It was as though the freighter, her crew and her cargo had been softly lifted from the face of the earth, leaving behind only these quiet, drifting witnesses to her existence. Speculation followed, as it always does when the sea holds its silence. Some believed the ship might have suffered a sudden structural failure, a hidden weakness in her hull perhaps, that sent her swiftly beneath the waves before a single distress signal could be sent. Yet there were no signs of a storm, no seismic events, no witnesses to a sinking. The sea, in its usual way, offered no answers. Others whispered of piracy, though such a theory felt strangely hollow. The mid-1950s were not a time nor a place for high seas raiding, and nothing aboard the Southern Districts seemed valuable enough to draw the attention of marauders. Moreover, pirates leave traces, ransacked holds, violence, ransom notes. The lifeboats, pristine and silent, suggested none of these. And then there were those who spoke quietly of something else, something less tangible, less graspable. a force woven into the fabric of the Bermuda Triangle itself. A quiet hand that reached out from the heart of the unknown, plucking ships and souls from the surface of reality and drawing them into an unseen place beyond human reach. For those left ashore, the families, friends, and loved ones of the crew, the mystery of the southern districts settled like a soft, persistent ache. They waited, watched, and hoped, clinging to the slender threads of possibility that perhaps some explanation, some scrap of information, might one day surface. But the days turned to weeks, the weeks to months, and the silence remained. The name of the southern districts joined the growing litany of the Triangle's lost, spoken in soft, reverent tones by sailors who passed through the same waters, marked upon maps by cartographers with faint, hesitant annotations. Disappeared July 1955. She became a quiet caution, a whisper in the hearts of those who ventured into the strange, serene stretch of sea where logic often failed, and the world seemed to soften into something quieter, something darker. The Bermuda Triangle did not howl for its victims, nor did it mark their passing with storms or fire. It simply took. Like a shadow passing across a quiet room. Like a thought that slips away just before it forms into words. And so our journey drifts onward, deeper into the soft folds of these haunting tales. A voyage not through storms or tempests, but through the silent, persistent mystery that lingers in the heart of a sea that watches, waits, and sometimes softly takes. The sunken hours of twilight draped the horizon as the steamship Marlowe pressed steadily through the glassy waters of the Sargasso Sea. The ship's copper hull cleaved the ocean with an eerie silence, broken only by the soft churn of paddles and the muted murmurs of its weary crew. Captain Elias Rowan stood at the prow, his gloved hand resting lightly on the weathered rail, his eyes fixed upon the wavering horizon, where sky and sea bled into each other in pale shades of blue and violet. The ship had been at sea for 27 days, tracing a supply route meant to skirt the southern edge of the Bermuda Triangle, a route considered safe by the old sea charts. And yet, the deeper they drifted into these waters, the more tangible became the strange hush that seemed to press upon the crew's spirits, as though the sea itself had drawn a long, silent breath and now waited unseen and patient. At first, the men attributed their unease to mere superstition. They were, after all, merchant sailors hardened by years upon the waves. But it was undeniable. Something hung about the air. The compass had begun its faint, tremulous dance upon the third day of entering these coordinates, its needle veering slightly off and returning only after a stubborn pause. At night, the stars themselves seemed to glimmer with a subtle shift, their patterns unfamiliar, as if the firmament had been quietly altered while none were looking. It was on this 8th evening that the crew's shared discomfort began to yield to outright fear. The first sign came with the silence of the birds. Since they had departed the last known land, a flock of seabirds had kept loose company with the ship, their grey wings casting fleeting shadows across the decks. But that day, as the sun leaned westward, the birds had risen suddenly in a violent spiralling flight before vanishing into the clouds. They did not return. Shortly after, the sea itself changed. The water's usual rhythm, a soft, undulating dance, turned still. Not the calm of gentle seas, but a dead calm, like glass stretched unnaturally smooth, unmoving, save for the ship's disturbance. The sky, still coloured by the last embers of daylight, appeared suspended, its clouds oddly motionless, as though some unseen hand had paused the very world. Elias Rowan did not speak of these things, though he noticed them all. He kept his men working, polishing brass, tightening rigging, tending to meaningless tasks, more for the comfort of routine than necessity. A crew with empty hands, he knew, was a crew with idle thoughts, and idle thoughts bred fear. But as the night deepened, silence and darkness pooled thicker around them. The first real crack in the crew's stoicism came when Isaac Harker, a soft-spoken deckhand, climbed to the crow's nest for the first watch. He had barely settled when a faint, trembling cry echoed from the masthead. Those on deck froze, heads snapping upward. "Aye," Isaac's voice broke mid-call, a strained, choked sound that stiffened spines. There's something." Captain Rowan's boots rang sharp against the planks as he moved quickly, cupping his hands around his mouth. "Harker! Report!" A long pause answered him, filled only by the sigh of the wind. Then a sound, like the faintest whimper, floated down from the mast. "I see lights out there, moving," but the words came slowly, drawn out by confusion or disbelief. "They're under the water." A cold lance pierced through Rowan's chest. He shouted for Harker to hold steady and ordered a lantern hoisted high. Men scrambled, hands fumbling, hearts quickening. The ship's lantern was raised aloft, casting a trembling glow against the mast and the dark waters beyond. And there, just beyond the reach of the lantern's light, moved faint glimmers. Like will-o'-the-wisps, pale and shifting beneath the surface. They glowed faintly, swirling in strange, deliberate patterns as though dancing to music only they could hear. The movement was unnatural, the rhythm too precise to be mere marine life. No man spoke. The lights began to form lines, then circles, then spirals. And as they did, a low hum, a resonance felt more in bone than ear, seemed to seep from the water itself, vibrating faintly through the ship's hull. Elias Rowan swallowed hard. "Lower the sails. We drift with the current." "Aye, Captain," came the soft, fearful reply. The sails dropped slowly and the ship surrendered its momentum, yielding to the unseen pull of the water. The lights beneath did not recede. Instead, they adjusted their dance, curling nearer, their faint glow flickering upon the ship's hull like the soft play of moonlight. One by one, the crew gathered along the rail, drawn by a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. The hum intensified, subtly, steadily, until it felt like a low chant vibrating in the marrow of every man aboard. Then, as though summoned by the silent call, a shape rose from the water. It broke the surface without a ripple, a dark, sinuous form, half obscured by shadow. Its outline was unclear, but it seemed elongated, with smooth, glistening skin that reflected none of the lantern's light. At its sides, fins or limbs unfurled slowly, like the slow opening of a monstrous flower. The hum grew louder. Elias Rowan's breath caught. For one harrowing heartbeat, he met eyes. Yes, eyes, dark and fathomless, set into the creature's sleek head. The gaze held no malice, no hunger, only a blank, almost mournful curiosity. The creature hovered a moment longer before sinking slowly back beneath the glassy surface. The glowing lights faded with it, dimming into the depths until only the dark sea remained. No one spoke for a long time. It was Isaac who finally broke the silence, his voice small from atop the mast. "Captain, did we dream that?" Rowan exhaled slowly, tasting salt and dread on his lips. "No," he said softly. "I fear we did not." The hum had ceased. The stars above blinked, steady and familiar once more. The sea resumed its gentle lap against the hull. And yet, though the moment had passed, its weight lingered, a silent pact made with forces neither man nor chart could explain. The crew dispersed slowly, like men retreating from the edge of a precipice they hadn't known they stood upon. That night, few aboard the Marlow slept, though the ship drifted onward into the heart of the triangle, its course steady, its fate unwritten. In the quiet that followed, hearts throbbed with a fearful wonder, and though none dared voice it aloud, a single shared thought pulsed in the mind of every man. They had glimpsed something ancient, and the sea had noticed them. The dawn broke not with the fanfare of golden rays, but with a dim, silvery pall that draped itself over the endless expanse of water. It was a false dawn, a pale imitation of morning that seemed to hesitate, as though uncertain whether to rise at all. The air remained oppressively still, and the usual calls of seabirds or the distant rush of waves upon unseen shores were nowhere to be heard. Captain Elias Rowan emerged from his quarters before the first bell. His steps were soft against the dampened deck, his eyes scanning the horizon with the wariness of a man who felt the eyes of unseen forces upon him. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on his shoulders, a burden made heavier by the silent, haunted stares of his crew. The Marlow floated upon a sea like glass, its sails slack, its ropes limp in the breathless air. The ship had drifted nearly 2 nautical miles during the night, carried by a current that none of the charts acknowledged. Elias ran his hand along the rail, the wood cold beneath his touch, the faint echo of the underwater hum still reverberating faintly within his bones. As he made his rounds, he noted the men, silent, restless, their eyes cast downward or watching the horizon with expressions vacillating between dread and wonder. None spoke of the lights beneath the waves, nor of the dark creature that had risen like a spectre from some ancient abyss. But in their silence the memory throbbed, shared, undeniable, alive. At the stern, young Thomas Gray, the ship's carpenter's mate, was crouched low, peering intently into the water. His face bore a pale, almost feverish look. Elias approached, his shadow falling softly across the boy's hunched form. "What is it, lad?" the captain asked, keeping his voice low, almost reverent. Thomas glanced up, his eyes wide and rimmed with shadows. "It's the water, sir. It's whispering." Elias's brow furrowed and he stepped closer, kneeling beside the boy. For a long moment there was nothing, only the faint lapping of water against the hull, soft and innocent. But then as he leaned in, he heard it, a faint whispering sound, like countless voices murmuring just beyond understanding. They were not sharp nor menacing, but soft, melodic even, as though the sea itself hummed a lullaby known only to the deep. "Do you hear it, Captain?" Thomas whispered. "I do," Elias replied quietly, his eyes narrowing as he searched the shimmering surface. They knelt there together for a span of breaths before the sound faded, dissolving into the hush of the dawn. When Elias stood, Thomas remained crouched a moment longer, as if reluctant to break some fragile connection. The boy finally rose, his hands trembling slightly, and gave the captain a shaky nod before retreating below deck. Elias remained at the stern, watching the water. He did not know whether the whispers had been meant for them, or if they had merely trespassed upon some ancient dialogue between the sea and the mysteries that slumbered within it. By mid-morning, a thin mist began to creep across the water, rising in slow, twisting tendrils that clung to the ship like spectral hands. The mist was peculiar, not the damp, grey shroud familiar to seafarers, but a soft, luminous veil that glowed faintly with a light of its own. It hovered close to the water's surface, moving in patterns that seemed deliberate. The crew gathered at the railings, their whispers hushed, their eyes wide as they watched the mist undulate and swirl. Occasionally, faint shapes appeared within it, suggestions of figures, half-seen silhouettes that drifted just beyond recognition. Faces, perhaps, or illusions born of weary eyes and frayed nerves. But there was one form that none could mistake for a trick of light. Shortly after midday, as the bell rang hollowly across the deck, the mist parted at the bow of the ship, revealing a single figure standing upon the water. Elias Rowan stepped forward, his breath catching in his throat. The figure was tall, draped in what appeared to be flowing robes that shimmered like moonlight upon ripples. Its face was obscured beneath a deep hood, shadowed even in the diffused glow of the mist. Yet from beneath the cowl, two faint lights burned, a soft silvery gleam where eyes should have been. The being stood utterly still, its feet, or what passed for them, resting upon the surface of the sea without causing so much as a ripple. The air around it shimmered faintly, and the mist coiled protectively at its sides. No one moved, no one spoke. Elias felt his heart thundering within his chest, yet his limbs remained calm, as though some unseen hand held him steady. Slowly, reverently, he removed his hat and held it to his chest, a silent gesture of respect to whatever stood before them. The figure raised a hand, long, slender fingers extending with a grace that defied nature, and pointed directly at the Marlowe. The sea beneath the ship stirred. With a slow, steady movement, the mist surrounding the vessel began to coil inward, wrapping the hull in soft, luminous bands. The glow intensified, casting ethereal shadows across the deck, and with it came a sensation, neither cold nor warm, but a soft, pulsing presence that seemed to seep into the wood, the ropes, the very air. Elias closed his eyes, allowing the sensation to wash over him. It was not a feeling of menace nor of welcome. It was acknowledgement. When he opened his eyes once more, the figure upon the water had vanished. The mist receded, withdrawing in gentle swirls until it dissolved completely, leaving the sea once more bare and silent. The crew stood in stunned silence, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. Elias straightened, replacing his hat with slow, deliberate motion. "We are seen," he murmured to no one in particular. That night, as the Marlowe drifted further into the heart of the triangle, the stars returned, familiar, steady, their ancient light undisturbed. The whispers ceased. The sea resumed its slow, gentle breathing, but beneath the surface, beyond sight, the great unknowable vastness stirred, and though the crew dared not speak of it, a shared understanding settled upon them like a quiet pact. They were not alone in these waters. The deep had acknowledged their presence, and the voyage was far from over. Nightfall came as a velvet curtain, descending softly upon the Marlow and the glassy sea that bore her. The wind remained absent, the sails hanging limp against the masts like forgotten drapery. Overhead the stars blinked with an unsettling clarity, their familiar constellations seeming closer somehow, sharp against the dark, silent sky. The crew moved quietly beneath them, voices low, footsteps soft upon the wooden deck, as though they feared disturbing an invisible presence. Captain Elias Rowan kept his vigil at the helm, eyes fixed upon the darkened waters ahead. His hands rested upon the wheel, though there was little need for guidance. The ship drifted without resistance, moving steadily as though drawn along an invisible path. The compass, tucked away in its brass casing upon the navigation stand, lay useless, the needle dancing in slow, tremulous arcs, never settling. The crew had begun calling this stretch of sea the Stillness. No orders had been given to christen it so, yet the name had passed in hushed whispers from man to man until it became a silent truth. The stillness swallowed all sound, all motion, save for the inexorable drift of the Marlow and the quiet beat of hearts aboard her. It was in this hush of night, under the watch of a silvered moon, that the true strangeness began. The first sign came from the water itself. Near the starboard side, where the hull's shadow met the sea, a faint shimmer appeared, like moonlight caught upon a ripple. Elias's gaze sharpened as he watched the shimmer grow, soft and pearlescent, spreading in gentle arcs across the surface. The light danced in slow spirals, delicate as a whisper, until it stretched in looping patterns around the drifting ship. A murmur of voices stirred behind him. Elias turned his head slightly, finding several crewmen gathered along the rail, eyes wide, faces pale in the lantern glow. Thomas Gray stood among them, his hand clenched tightly upon the rail's edge, knuckles white. "It's happening again," Thomas whispered, though the words carried easily in the unnatural quiet. Elias gave a slow nod. "Steady, lads. Eyes sharp, hands ready." But none reached for weapons. What good would a blade be against such a mystery? The shimmering patterns continued, coalescing into intricate, glowing symbols that twisted slowly upon the water's surface. They bore no resemblance to letters nor numbers, no language known to man, but rather resembled ancient sigils, loops and spirals entwined with perfect symmetry. The sight was mesmerizing, and more than one sailor felt his breath catch as the lights pulsed softly, as though in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat beneath the waves. Then came the second sign. A low, resonant tone vibrated through the hull, not a sound but a frequency, a hum felt deep within the chest. It thrummed steadily, neither loud nor faint, filling every crevice of the ship, every fibre of the men who stood upon her. Elias gripped the wheel tighter, his heart matching the hum's slow, deliberate pulse. The sigils upon the water responded, glowing brighter, shifting their patterns with deliberate grace. The shimmering arcs folded inward, spiralling toward the bow of the Marlow, where they merged into a single, radiant point upon the water. From that point something began to rise. At first it appeared no more than a ripple, a disturbance within the shimmering light. But as it lifted from the sea, the form took shape, a column of water, clear as glass, rising slowly, unnaturally smooth, its surface gleaming with the same pearlescent glow. Within the column shapes moved, dark, fluid shadows that twisted and turned like smoke trapped beneath ice. The crew stood frozen, eyes wide, hearts thundering. The column rose until it reached twice the height of a man, its base merging seamlessly with the water below. The shadows within coalesced, shifting until they formed a single shape, a figure, humanoid in outline but impossibly slender, elongated limbs drifting like tendrils within the liquid embrace. It was faceless, save for two hollow, luminous eyes that glowed softly, staring out from within the watery veil. Elias stepped forward, his breath slow, deliberate. His voice, when it came, was calm, a quiet murmur carried on the hushed air. "What are you?" The figure within the column did not move, yet a sound answered, not a word, but a harmonic tone that echoed within the chest and mind alike. It was neither threatening nor soothing, but filled with an overwhelming sense of ancient presence, a weight of countless ages pressing gently upon the heart. The tone faded, replaced by a vision, not a dream, nor a hallucination, but a vivid impression that washed over every man aboard the Marlow. They saw in a single heartbeat images that defied explanation, vast cities of gleaming towers beneath endless oceans, illuminated by soft eternal lights, creatures of impossible beauty and terror gliding through silent depths, great machines humming with power beyond human comprehension, lost in the abyss of forgotten time. And amidst it all, a presence, ancient, watchful, patient. The vision receded, and the column of water began to lower, dissolving slowly into the sea with a silent grace. The sigils upon the water's surface faded, their light dimming until the sea returned to its dark, glassy stillness. The hum within the ship ceased. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then Thomas Gray spoke, his voice trembling, yet filled with an awe that reached beyond fear. "We've seen them, the ones before us." Elias nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the dark waters where the vision had vanished. The ones who came and stayed. Silence fell once more, but this time it was different. Not the silence of dread, but of reverence. The crew dispersed in quiet pairs, returning to their duties or seeking refuge within their bunks. The air remained thick with wonder, a fragile peace settling over the Marlowe like a blessing unspoken. Elias remained on deck, watching the horizon until the faintest blush of dawn touched the sky. His heart beat in quiet rhythm with the memory of the vision, a silent acknowledgement of a world deeper, older, and far more wondrous than any chart had ever dared to reveal. In the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, beneath stars and seas alike, the Marlowe sailed onward, not merely a ship upon water, but a vessel adrift upon the tides of ancient mysteries seen and perhaps remembered. The dawn arrived quietly, creeping over the rim of the world with a hesitant light that painted the sky in soft hues of lavender and grey. The sea, still motionless, reflected the subtle glow like a vast, endless mirror. The Marlowe drifted onward, her hull cutting no wake, as though she glided not upon water, but upon the surface of a dream. Below deck, the crew stirred in hushed murmurs, their movements slow, their eyes distant. The vision of the night before lingered upon every heart, a haunting blend of awe and quiet reverence that words could not touch. No man spoke openly of the figures beneath the sea, nor of the cities glimpsed in that silent communion. Yet in every glance exchanged, in every quiet nod passed between shipmates, the shared memory trembled like the echo of a far-off song. Captain Elias Rowan stood alone at the bow, hands clasped loosely behind his back. The windless air hung about him, heavy with an almost sacred stillness. He gazed out across the endless sea, eyes tracing the faint horizon where water met sky in a seamless embrace. For the first time in his long years at sea, Elias felt himself not merely upon the ocean, but within it, a part of its vast, silent heart. As the morning light strengthened, a soft sound rose from below. The muted ring of the ship's bell struck gently, almost hesitantly. Elias turned, watching as Isaac Harker, the deckhand who had first seen the underwater lights, approached with a wary expression. "Captain," Isaac began, voice low, respectful, "there's something on the main deck you might wish to see." Elias inclined his head, following the young man aft. The crew gathered in a loose circle near the centre of the deck, eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and quiet dread. They parted wordlessly as the captain approached, revealing the object that lay upon the planks. It was a sphere, no larger than a man's clenched fist, resting upon the deck as though placed there by unseen hands. Its surface shimmered faintly, an ever-shifting pattern of light and shadow rippling across it like living mother of pearl. There were no seams, no markings, no sign of how it had come to be there. Elias crouched slowly, studying the object with a careful gaze. The sphere pulsed softly, emitting a faint warmth that brushed against his skin like the gentle heat of the morning sun. "Who brought this here?" Elias asked quietly, though in his heart he knew the answer. No man spoke. Thomas Gray stepped forward, his voice barely more than a whisper. "It was there when we woke, sitting right there, Captain, like it was waiting." Elias reached out a hand, pausing mere inches from the sphere's surface. The warmth intensified slightly, as if acknowledging his presence. For a moment he hesitated, sensing that to touch it might be to cross another threshold, one from which there would be no return. Then, with a steady breath, he laid his fingers gently upon the sphere. A soft vibration coursed through his hand, spreading in a gentle wave up his arm, across his chest, and into his heart. The sensation was not painful nor unsettling. It was as though he had dipped his hand into a flowing current of cool living water. And then, once again, came the vision. But this time it was not the silent grandeur of undersea cities, nor the haunting beauty of forgotten beings. This vision was personal, a glimpse into something deeper, more intimate. Elias saw a ship, ancient and graceful, sailing these same waters beneath a sky fractured by strange constellations. Its crew moved with quiet purpose, eyes gleaming with a light not born of earthly fire. The ship drifted upon the same glassy sea, untouched by storm or time, its sails bearing symbols that shimmered softly in the windless air, and aboard her, a captain, tall, robed in garments woven of light, standing at the helm with a serene, knowing gaze. The captain turned, meeting Elias's eyes across the gulf of vision and centuries, and in that shared gaze a silent message passed, one beyond words, beyond thought. You are upon the path. The vision faded as gently as it had come. The sphere beneath Elias's hand grew still, its light softening to a faint, pulsing glow. Slowly, reverently, Elias lifted his hand, rising to his feet with a steady calm. The crew watched him in silence. Elias met their gazes, his voice low but clear. We are not the first to sail this way, and we will not be the last. A ripple of understanding moved through the gathered men, soft nods, eyes reflecting the same quiet awe Elias felt within his chest. The fear that had once shadowed their hearts began to loosen its grip, replaced by something stranger, a sense of belonging. The sphere remained where it had appeared, glowing softly upon the deck like a living star. By noon, the sea began to change once more. A faint breeze stirred, a gentle breath that set the sails to a soft, whispering tremble. The Marlowe answered, her prow shifting slightly as though aligning with an unseen current. The compass needle, silent for days, quivered within its casing and pointed steadily forward. Elias took his place at the helm, his hands resting lightly upon the wheel. Around him, the crew resumed their duties, not with the mechanical motions of obligation, but with a quiet purpose, their steps steady, their eyes calm. The voyage continued, not by force of wind nor strength of hand, but by a silent agreement with the sea itself. That night, as stars unfolded in soft brilliance overhead, the Marlowe sailed on, guided by a current unseen, beneath a sky that felt vast and welcoming. The sphere remained upon the deck, its gentle pulse a silent companion to all aboard. And within every heart a quiet certainty took root. The Bermuda Triangle was no mere place of doom nor a haven for dark omens, but a passageway, a threshold between the world known and the mysteries that lie beyond the grasp of men. They had been called, and the sea had answered. The night stretched long and languid over the open sea, its calm deepened by the soft shimmer of starlight upon the Marlowe's polished decks. The wind, though faint, stirred enough to set the rigging to a slow, rhythmic creak, a gentle lullaby beneath the hushed murmurs of the watch. Overhead, the sky remained unblemished, a canvas of distant lights that blinked with the quiet solemnity of ancient witnesses. Captain Elias Rowan remained at his post long after the bells marked the changing of the watch. His hands rested lightly upon the wheel, though there was little need for guidance. The ship answered some unseen pull, her course steady and true, as though cradled in the hands of a current no chart had ever recorded. The soft, steady pulse of the sphere upon the deck beside him radiated a gentle warmth into the air, a silent presence neither menacing nor benign, but merely present. As the second watch settled, a soft knock sounded at Elias's shoulder. He turned slightly to find Isaac Harker standing with a respectful nod, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes reflecting a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Permission to speak, Captain?" Elias inclined his head. "Always." Isaac hesitated, his gaze flickering briefly to the softly glowing sphere. "Some of the lads, they've been dreaming, sir. Strange dreams. They started last night, and they've only grown clearer." Elias studied the young man quietly. "What kind of dreams?" Isaac's jaw worked before he answered. "Not nightmares, not visions of terror or harm, but places, strange places, cities beneath the sea, vast halls of crystal and stone, stars that move in patterns I've never known, and faces, sir, not human but not cruel, watching us, as if they're waiting." Elias felt a quiet chill run through him, though his heart remained steady. "How many of the crew?" "Most," Isaac replied softly. "At least those I've spoken to. They say the dreams feel real, as though they're more memory than fancy." The captain gave a slow nod. "And you?" Isaac's gaze dropped. "I see them too, sir. Every time I close my eyes." Elias placed a firm hand upon the young man's shoulder. "Thank you, Isaac. Let the men know. Should they wish to speak of these dreams, they may do so freely. No man will be mocked for what he feels in this place." Isaac's shoulders eased, and he gave a grateful nod before stepping away, his figure melting quietly into the soft shadows of the night watch. Elias returned his gaze to the horizon, the wheel steady beneath his hands. His mind lingered upon Isaac's words, not with fear, but with a strange, budding sense of understanding. The visions, the whispers, the silent communion that seemed to pass between ship and sea, it all felt less like intrusion and more like invitation. It was shortly before dawn when the next sign came. The wind shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but enough for the captain's seasoned senses to notice. It carried upon it a scent, faint and fleeting, unlike anything he had ever known. Not the brine of the sea, nor the salt sting of coastal winds, but a fragrance soft and hauntingly sweet, like the memory of distant blossoms borne upon a gentle breeze. Elias inhaled deeply, his eyes narrowing. The scent stirred something within him, an echo of the visions he had glimpsed, the song of the sea's depths woven into a single breath of air. Moments later, a soft glow appeared on the horizon. It began as a faint luminescence, a low shimmer upon the water's edge, growing steadily brighter as the Marlow drifted closer. The crew stirred from their tasks, drawn to the rails by the silent, irresistible pull of that distant light. Elias felt his heart beat faster, not with fear, but with a rising anticipation that surged quietly within him. As the ship neared, the source of the glow revealed itself, a vast, gently undulating field of luminescence spread across the surface of the sea. It stretched far beyond sight, a glowing expanse of soft golden light that pulsed in slow rhythmic waves. The water itself seemed to hum. A low, resonant vibration felt through the soles of their boots. The crew gathered, silent and awestruck, watching as the Marlow glided upon the glowing sea as though welcomed into a sacred chamber. Beneath the surface, faint shapes moved, soft, flowing forms that swam with deliberate grace, their bodies casting shadows within the luminescence. They were unlike any sea creature known to man, elongated, ethereal, their movements slow and dreamlike, as if dancing in harmony with the silent song of the deep. Elias watched them, his heart thrumming in quiet reverence. Then, without warning, the soft hum beneath the ship rose in a slow crescendo. The light intensified, pulsing in time with the heartbeat of the sea, and with it came a sound, a single, pure note that rang clear across the water. It was not a sound of alarm nor a call of warning, but a welcoming chime, soft and melodious, resonating within the hearts of all who heard it. The crew stood frozen, hearts beating in unison with the song. And then, softly, impossibly, the water itself began to rise. Across the glowing expanse, towers of liquid light emerged, slow, graceful spirals that lifted gently from the surface, reaching toward the sky. They shimmered like living glass, their translucent forms swirling with the soft luminescence of the sea. Each tower moved with a deliberate elegance, forming patterns that defied logic, as though painting a silent symphony upon the canvas of the dawn-lit ocean. Elias felt his breath catch, a soft gasp escaping his lips. Around him, the men watched in silent wonder, their eyes wide, faces bathed in the soft glow of the rising towers. No words passed between them. None were needed. The towers rose higher, their peaks vanishing softly into the dawn mist. Then as one they paused, motionless, serene. The hum faded into a soft whisper, the song lingering in the air like the final notes of a celestial choir. Elias felt a hand touch his shoulder. He turned to find Thomas Gray beside him, his young face reflecting the soft glow, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and quiet peace. "What is it, Captain?" Thomas whispered. Elias looked back toward the silent towers, his heart filled with a calm certainty he could not explain. "It's a greeting," he murmured, "a welcome and a reminder." Thomas frowned slightly. "A reminder?" Elias nodded slowly, his gaze lingering upon the soft, swirling lights. "That we are guests here, that we have stepped beyond the known, into the memory of the world before." The towers shimmered once more, then slowly began to dissolve, their forms melting back into the sea with a soft, sighing grace. The glow upon the water faded, returning to the soft, silken surface of the calm sea. The Marlow sailed on, her course unchanged, her heart joined silently with the ancient rhythms of the deep. and as dawn broke fully upon the horizon, casting soft gold upon the quiet faces of the crew, the sense of dread that had once shadowed their journey was gone, replaced instead by a quiet awe and a deep, abiding sense of reverence. The Bermuda Triangle had opened its arms, and the Marlow drifted ever deeper into the heart of its silent, unfathomable embrace. The midday sun hung high in a sky swept clean of clouds, its golden rays spilling languidly over the open sea. Yet even beneath its generous light, the waters upon which the Marlow sailed retained their curious stillness, unbroken by wave or wind, save for the ship's quiet passage. The sea gleamed like polished obsidian, its surface dappled only with faint glimmers, as though the memory of the morning's spectral towers still lingered upon it. Captain Elias Rowan stood at the quarterdeck, his hands clasped lightly behind his back, eyes scanning the endless horizon. The steady breeze of the previous night had ebbed into a soft whisper, a caress that stirred the edges of the sails but lent no real speed. And yet, the Marlow moved forward, as if propelled by some unseen current, gliding with a grace that felt less like travel and more like being carried upon a gentle, unseen hand. Around him, the crew worked in a quiet rhythm, their steps measured, their voices low. The usual banter of seafaring men, the laughter, the curses, the bawdy songs, had faded entirely. In its place grew a reverent hush, as if all aboard sensed they were moving within a world far removed from the familiar, brushing against mysteries best approached with silent awe. The sphere remained upon the main deck, its soft luminescence unwavering. No man dared move it, nor did any feel the need. It rested where it had first appeared, pulsing gently in rhythm with the faint hum that seemed ever present within the ship's timbers, a quiet, living heartbeat that blended with their own. By mid-afternoon, a soft veil of mist began to creep along the sea's surface. It rose in slow, curling wisps, drifting lazily about the Marlow as though drawn to her presence. The mist carried with it a scent faint and delicate, a perfume of salt and earth and something else, something older, like the scent of rain falling upon sun-warmed stone. The crew gathered instinctively along the rails, eyes tracing the shifting veil. No fear stirred among them now, only a quiet curiosity, tempered by the deepening sense of belonging that had taken root in their hearts. It was Thomas Gray who first noticed the shapes within the mist. He stood at the forward rail, his slender frame outlined against the brightening shroud. His voice, soft and steady, drifted back to the captain. "Captain, there are vessels in the mist." Elias stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he followed the boy's gaze, and there, half veiled within the shifting folds of mist, moved the faint outlines of ships. They glided silently across the water, craft of every size and shape, their forms blurred but unmistakable. Some bore tall, graceful masts with sails that hung like silvered veils, others rode low upon the sea, their hulls gleaming with a soft inner light. There were vessels of ancient design, galleys with curved prows, long-forgotten frigates with ornate sterns, and others whose forms defied any earthly shipwright's hand. They moved with a slow, stately grace, gliding through the mist as though upon invisible currents. No oars dipped, no sails caught wind. And though their decks were obscured, Elias felt with a certainty deep in his bones that they were not empty. The Marlow drifted among them in perfect silence. The crew watched in awe as ship after ship passed, some close enough to touch, others vanishing into the swirling veil. The mist parted gently around each, curling with a soft, deliberate grace that spoke of intelligence rather than happenstance. Elias felt a hand brush lightly against his sleeve. He turned to see Isaac Harker standing at his side, eyes wide, face pale but calm. "Captain," Isaac whispered, "what are they?" Elias shook his head slowly. "Vessels, like ours, from before, from after, perhaps from elsewhere." Isaac's gaze returned to the ghostly fleet. "Do you think they see us?" "I believe," Elias murmured, his voice soft as the sea's breath. "They always have." The words felt right, though no logic gave them weight. The ships sailed past, silent, graceful, unknowable, and yet with every passing vessel Elias felt a softening of the space between them, as though invisible threads linked them all in a quiet communion. They were voyagers upon the same unseen tide, travellers of the same silent path. As the last of the spectral ships slipped into the mist beyond, a hush deeper than before settled over the Marlow. The crew remained still, their hearts stirred not by fear nor confusion, but by a sense of shared purpose, a quiet certainty that they had glimpsed a part of something vast and timeless. The mist began to thin, its folds unravelling slowly in the warm afternoon air. With its departure came a sound faint and distant, a soft chorus, like voices singing far beyond the horizon. The melody was slow, haunting, woven of notes so pure and clear that they seemed less sung than simply remembered. It drifted across the water, linked on the air like the gentle sigh of a long-forgotten lullaby. Elias closed his eyes, letting the song wash over him. He felt within it a deep, abiding peace, a sorrow touched by hope, a farewell tempered by welcome. It was not a song of parting, but of belonging. When he opened his eyes, the mist had gone. The horizon lay clear and bright, the sea stretching smooth and endless beneath a sky painted in soft hues of gold and pearl. The Marlowe sailed on, her course unchanged, her crew silent in the embrace of something greater than they had ever known. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows upon the still sea, Elias stood once more at the helm, his heart quiet, his mind at ease. Around him the crew moved with a calm that felt almost sacred, their faces soft with the glow of quiet wonder. They had sailed among phantoms, not of fear but of forgotten kin, and had been received not as strangers but as fellow travellers upon the silent roads of the deep. The Bermuda Triangle remained as much a mystery as before, and yet it had opened a door, not to doom, but to remembrance. And the Marlowe, with her crew of quiet hearts and watchful eyes, sailed onward into the endless twilight, embraced by the silent procession of the unseen fleet, a single thread in a tapestry far older and far more beautiful than any of them had ever imagined. The dusk that followed was unlike any other the Marlowe had known. As the sun slipped beneath the edge of the world, the colours of twilight did not fade into darkness, but lingered, soft violets and deep ambers melting gently into one another, casting a quiet radiance upon the sea. The waters remained glass smooth, reflecting the sky's gentle hues with a clarity that blurred the boundary between above and below, as if the ship drifted not on water, but within a living painting. The crew moved softly about their duties, though the term duty had become something fragile and symbolic, a way to mark the passing of time in a world that no longer seemed bound by the familiar cadence of days and nights. Words were few, gestures quiet. Even the usual sounds of a ship alive with men, the thud of boots upon planks, the soft clink of rope against mast, seemed to fade into the deep hush that hung over the vessel. Captain Elias Rowan kept to the quarterdeck, his figure outlined against the slow-burning glow of the horizon. The soft pulse of the sphere upon the main deck remained unchanged, a silent beacon of warm living light that flickered softly in harmony with the unseen rhythms of the deep. Shortly after nightfall, the sea began to stir. It was not a changing current nor the rising of a breeze, but a shift deeper and more profound, a sense of movement that stirred the air itself, subtle yet undeniable. The surface of the water shimmered faintly, ripples spreading in slow, deliberate arcs that did not break nor fade but lingered, overlapping in graceful patterns that pulsed softly in the quiet light. Elias watched in silence as the patterns grew, the ripples weaving into a vast, intricate design upon the water, a tapestry of circles and spirals, lines and arcs that moved with a precision and symmetry no hand of man could ever draw. One by one, the crew gathered at the rails, drawn by the silent unfolding of this strange seaborne artwork. No words passed between them. They watched, hearts quiet, as the patterns shifted and danced, their soft glow mirrored in the eyes of every man aboard. Thomas Gray stood near the bow, his slender form outlined against the shimmering water. He turned his head slightly, his voice carrying softly on the still air. "Captain, do you think it's a message?" Elias stepped forward, his gaze never leaving the sea. "Not a message," he replied softly. "A memory, a remembrance written upon the water." Thomas nodded slowly, accepting the words without question. The patterns continued to swirl, each line and curve folding seamlessly into the next, an endless, living script traced by the hands of the unseen. And then, without warning, a single point of light broke the surface. It rose slowly, a sphere of soft golden glow that lifted gently from the heart of the swirling patterns. Its light was pure and steady, casting long, slender reflections across the Marlowe's decks. The crew watched in hushed reverence as the sphere ascended, floating upward until it hovered just above the water's surface. Elias stepped closer, his breath caught in a quiet awe. The sphere pulsed softly, and as it did, a low, harmonious tone filled the air, gentle, melodic, resonating deep within the heart like the echo of a remembered song. One by one, other spheres followed. They emerged silently from the water, each rising with the same slow, graceful ascent, their lights mingling in a softing symphony of color and sound. Some hovered low, near the waves, others drifted higher, their glow casting gentle shadows upon the sails. They moved without haste, weaving delicate patterns in the air around the ship, like living stars drawn to a silent, unseen music. The crew stood motionless, their faces bathed in the soft glow. No fear stirred among them now, only a quiet, profound peace, as though they stood within the heart of something sacred. Elias turned his gaze upward, watching as the spheres continued their slow, intricate dance. He felt a deep, quiet knowing settle within him, an understanding without words or logic. They were not merely witnessing a phenomenon, they were part of it. The spheres wove around the ship in looping arcs, some passing enough for their gentle warmth to brush softly against skin, and as they moved, a faint melody in the air seemed to change, growing richer, layered with subtle harmonies that echoed within the heart like a memory from some distant, forgotten time. It was Isaac Harker who spoke first, his voice a soft whisper. "They're singing." Elias nodded slowly. They always have been. The realization settled gently upon the men, the understanding that this song, this dance of light and sound, had always existed, flowing unnoticed through the world. Only here, in this quiet heart of the sea, was it revealed to those who wandered close enough to listen. The spheres drifted closer, and for the first time, one of them came to rest upon the deck itself, settling softly upon the wood near Thomas Gray's feet. The boy knelt slowly, reaching out with a hand that trembled not with fear, but with quiet reverence. His fingers brushed the surface of the sphere. A soft pulse of light flowed gently into him, a warmth that spread up his arm, across his chest and into his heart. Thomas drew in a slow breath, his eyes closing as a quiet smile touched his lips. When he opened them again, Elias saw no fear there, no confusion, only peace and a quiet, abiding wonder. "It's showing me things," Thomas whispered. "Places I've never seen, memories that aren't mine, but feel like they could be." Elias placed a hand gently upon the boy's shoulder. "You are part of this, lad. We all are." One by one, the spheres began to draw near the men of the Marlowe, hovering close, offering the soft touch of light to hands both young and weathered. The crew accepted them without question, their hearts open, their spirits calm. And as the night deepened, the ship sailed on beneath a sky alive with silent stars and drifting spheres of gentle light, a vessel no longer alone upon the sea, but carried within the great, silent embrace of the unknown. By the time dawn's soft glow touched the horizon, the spheres had begun to rise, lifting gently into the sky, drifting slowly upward until they vanished into the soft hues of the waking day. The Marlowe remained upon the calm sea, her course steady, her heart light. And within every man aboard stirred the quiet, unspoken truth, that they had been touched by something far beyond the reach of words or reason. They had not merely sailed into the heart of a mystery, they had become part of its living song. The morning unfolded with a gentle grace, its light spilling softly over the silent expanse of sea, as though the sun itself feared to disturb the hushed serenity that had settled upon the world. The Marlowe glided forward with a silent elegance, her sails stirring faintly in a breeze so delicate it seemed conjured by the ship's motion alone. The sea, ever calm, reflected the pale hues of dawn, creating a mirrored realm where sky and water met in seamless unity. Captain Elias Rowan stood alone at the bow, his gaze steady upon the endless horizon. The sphere that had rested upon the deck the night before was gone, as were the silent orbs of light that had drifted among them, leaving behind only the faintest memory of their gentle warmth and the haunting echoes of their silent song. Yet, though the lights had vanished, something profound remained, a quiet resonance within the hearts of every man aboard, as though a soft chord had been struck in the depths of their souls and now hummed faintly within, unseen but ever present. The crew moved with an almost reverent calm, their duties carried out with a grace that transcended mere routine. The usual sharp commands and brisk replies were replaced by gestures, by quiet exchanges of knowing glances, as if words themselves might break the fragile beauty of the moment. Elias remained at his post long after the sun had climbed above the horizon, his thoughts adrift upon a current deeper than the sea beneath his ship. He had sailed for many years, braved storms and tempests, faced the unknown with a captain's resolve. But nothing in his long experience had prepared him for this voyage into the silent heart of the Bermuda Triangle. They had entered as sailors, wary of myths and whispered fears. But now they were something more. Witnesses, perhaps, or guests. Or perhaps, as Elias felt with a growing certainty, they had been travellers called by a summons they could never have resisted, a summons written not in ink or chart, but in the silent language of the deep. It was near midday when the sea stirred again. The first sign was a faint shimmer upon the water's surface, subtle like the heat mirage upon a distant road. It rippled outward in slow, concentric waves, centred upon a single point ahead of the ship's bow. The crew gathered quietly, their gazes drawn to the shimmering as moths to a flame, yet no fear stirred among them, only a deep, resonant calm. From the heart of the shimmering, a form began to rise. It lifted with a grace that defied the laws of nature, a structure formed not of wood nor stone, but of water itself, shaped and held in perfect stillness. It rose higher, unveiling itself in soft fluid curves, an archway woven from the very essence of the sea. The light of the sun caught upon its surface, casting delicate prisms that danced across the Marlowe's deck. The arch stood silent upon the water, tall and slender, its opening wide enough for the ship to pass beneath. Beyond it, the sea shimmered with a faint, inviting glow, as though beckoning them forward. Elias stepped forward, his breath slow, even. He felt the crew's eyes upon him, waiting, trusting. With a nod, he spoke softly, the words carrying across the hushed deck. "We sail on." No man questioned. No order was needed. The Marlowe glided toward the arch, her bow cutting the shimmering surface with barely a ripple. As they neared, the arch began to pulse softly, a gentle radiance flowing from its curves like a living heartbeat. The moment the ship passed beneath, a wave of sensation swept over them. Not a sound, nor a wind, but a quiet pulse that sank into the marrow of their bones. It was neither cold nor warm, neither welcome nor warning. It was recognition. On the other side, the sea opened before them in a way no man could have imagined. The water stretched outward, smooth and gleaming, but no longer empty. Shapes moved beneath the surface, vast, slow-moving forms that drifted with a grace beyond comprehension. Some shone with a faint inner light, their bodies translucent and fluid, while others moved in solemn procession, their outlines obscured by the shimmering depths. Among them were structures, towers and spires rising from the ocean floor, their forms alien yet hauntingly beautiful. They glowed softly in the filtered light, their surfaces etched with patterns that seemed to shift and dance as the ship sailed past. Elias felt his heart rise into his throat. They were cities. Cities beneath the sea. The crew gathered at the rails, silent, eyes wide with awe. The visions they had glimpsed in dreams, half-remembered echoes of ancient memories, now unfolded before them in waking life. No voice disturbed the sacred hush. Even Thomas Gray, who had often been the first to speak in wonder, stood quietly, his young face alight with the soft glow of the sun-dappled sea. Elias turned his gaze downward, watching as the Marlowe glided gently over the submerged world. He could see now that the sea itself was alive with movement, a dance of creatures and structures, of light and shadow woven together in a silent symphony that spoke not to the ears but to the heart. And then, as if in answer to the silent awe that filled them, a figure emerged. It rose from the depths with a slow, deliberate grace, a tall, slender form cloaked in flowing tendrils that shimmered softly in the light. Its skin glowed with a faint luminescence, and its eyes, deep and luminous, met Elias's gaze across the quiet water. The figure drifted just beneath the surface, matching the ship's course with an effortless glide. It extended a hand, long, slender fingers that moved with a slow, elegant precision toward the Marlowe, palm open, as though in silent greeting. Elias placed his hand upon the rail, his heart steady, his eyes never leaving the figure. For a moment, the world held its breath, and then the figure offered a slow, graceful nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, of recognition between traveller and guardian, between guest and host. The ship sailed on, the figure gliding beside them for a time before fading softly back into the depths, its form dissolving into the shimmering embrace of the undersea city. The men remained at the rails long after the figure vanished, their hearts filled not with fear, but with a profound sense of belonging, a quiet understanding that they were part of something vast, something ancient and beautiful beyond words. And as the sun traced its slow arc across the sky, the Marlowe sailed deeper into the silent heart of the Bermuda Triangle, her course unwritten, her destiny forever changed. For they were no longer mere sailors upon the sea. They were witnesses to a world hidden beneath the veil of myth, and keepers of its quiet, eternal memory. The light of late afternoon bathed the sea in a subdued, honeyed glow, softening every edge, blending sky and water into a single, seamless tapestry. The Marlowe drifted onward, her passage marked only by the gentle wake of her bow. Yet even that seemed subdued, as though the ship glided not through water but through some delicate veil woven of light and memory. Captain Elias Rowan stood watchful at the helm, his hands resting lightly upon the wheel. The air was cool, scented faintly with salt and something more elusive, a whisper of earth after rain, the scent of old stone bathed in sun. Around him the crew moved with a stillness that was not idleness but a quiet attunement, a shared reverence to the unseen song that thrummed softly beneath the surface of the sea. The sun hovered low upon the horizon, its golden disk veiled behind a thin shroud of luminous mist. The sky stretched wide, brushed with soft strokes of rose and silver, while below the sea mirrored its every hue with flawless grace. As they sailed, the submerged city drifted beneath them, its spires and towers reaching skyward from the ocean floor like the frozen gestures of a silent, waiting people. Some structures gleamed with a soft, internal radiance. Others shimmered faintly as they caught the sun's dying light. The city stretched beyond sight in every direction, vast and silent, a world apart, breathing quietly beneath the veil of the deep. Elias remained silent, watching the silent grandeur with a calm that seemed to rise from some hidden well within him. He no longer wondered at their fortune, nor questioned their place upon this strange path. The questions that once gnawed at the edges of his mind had softened, faded into a quiet acceptance. They belonged here, if only for a time. At the forward rail, Thomas Gray leaned outward, his gaze fixed upon a distant tower whose surface shimmered with a shifting play of soft colours. The boy's eyes reflected the soft luminescence, his young face serene with a quiet wonder. Isaac Harker stood nearby, arms folded lightly, his expression thoughtful rather than wary. His gaze followed a slow procession of graceful shapes that moved with liquid ease among the city's spires, creatures neither fish nor man, their forms elegant, their movements deliberate. It was Isaac who broke the hush, his voice soft, edged with reverence. "It's like a memory, a world before ours." Elias heard the words as if from far away, echoing softly against the quiet that wrapped around them. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the sea ahead. Or perhaps, he murmured, a world beside ours, always there, waiting. As the sun edged lower, the sea stirred once more. The patterns upon the water, those intricate ripples and luminous arcs they had seen before, began to weave anew, delicate and deliberate. The shifting designs stretched outward from the Marlowe, encircling her in silent, graceful spirals that glowed faintly in the fading light. From within those spirals, soft points of light emerged. At first they appeared as faint glimmers, distant stars reflected upon the sea, but as they drew closer, their forms sharpened into slender, translucent shapes, moving with a poise and grace that defied earthly understanding. They glided silently around the ship, weaving slow, deliberate patterns upon the air itself. The crew watched in hushed awe, their faces bathed in the soft, ethereal glow. The forms circled the Marlowe without haste, their movement harmonious, like dancers tracing the steps of an ancient, silent waltz. Some hovered close to the rails, their shimmering bodies casting faint reflections upon the deck. Others drifted higher, their outlines soft against the darkening sky. Elias felt a presence, not threatening nor commanding, but gentle, observing. He stepped forward, laying a hand upon the rail as one of the beings drifted near. Its form was slender, graceful, a flowing arc of light and mist, with no sharp edges, no defined features. Yet within its luminous outline, Elias sensed a deep intelligence, a quiet watchfulness. For a heartbeat, the being hovered beside him, its soft glow pulsing gently in the dimming light, and then, as if drawn by some silent cord, it reached forth, not with hands, for it had none, but with a soft extension of its shimmering form. The touch brushed lightly against Elias's chest, a faint, tingling warmth that sank deep into his heart. In that moment, Elias felt a wave of memory, not his own, yet somehow deeply familiar. Visions of seas untouched by human sails, of skies filled with strange, radiant stars, of cities rising not from stone and wood, but from living light and flowing water. A world not lost nor abandoned, but existing in parallel, a silent echo beside the waking world, unseen yet ever present. The vision faded gently, leaving behind a quiet sense of connection, a thread woven softly into the fabric of his being. Elias drew a slow breath, his heart calm, his spirit at peace. The luminous forms began to ascend, lifting slowly into the twilight sky, their movement as fluid as drifting mist. One by one they rose beyond sight, their soft glow blending with the first stars that pricked the darkening heavens. The patterns upon the water faded with them, dissolving into gentle ripples that melted back into the sea's calm embrace. The Marlowe sailed on, her course steady, her heart light. As night deepened, the soft glow of the submerged city remained faintly visible beneath the water, like embers glowing softly in the ashes of a dying fire. The crew remained on deck, some seated quietly at the rails, others standing in silent contemplation. Elias stood with them, feeling the steady pulse of the ship beneath his feet, the quiet rhythm of the sea within his chest. They had sailed into the heart of a mystery not meant to be solved, but to be witnessed, a song written not in words or deeds, but in silent communion with the unseen. And as the first whispers of night wind stirred upon the water, carrying with it the soft hum of the living deep, Elias knew, beyond doubt or fear, that their voyage was far from over. They were part of the story now, woven into the quiet song of the sea. The winds had calmed since the night before, leaving the sea beneath the dimming horizon in a curious hush. The freighter Maribel Dawn moved gently through the morning mists, her steel hull slicing through swathes of pale fog that lay upon the water like an endless veil. Captain Julian Harrow stood at the prow, his gloved hand resting lightly on the worn rail, eyes fixed on the slow rolling patterns ahead. Though the engines hummed with their usual rhythm and the waves lapped softly against the sides, there was a presence, a strange stillness in the air that gnawed at his senses. The dawn had not broken in earnest. Instead, a cold grey glow spread across the sky, smudging the horizon with uncertain light. The Maribel Dawn sailed through the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, on a route she had taken a dozen times before. Yet today, every shadow along the deck, every whisper of wind, felt different. Julian could not shake the sense that the world around him held its breath. From somewhere amidships, a faint sound echoed, a soft, rhythmic tapping, as though someone rapped gently against metal. Julian turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the deck. The crew moved in their usual places, tending to the morning checks. No one else seemed to notice. He tried to dismiss it, attributing the sound to loose rigging or shifting cargo, but the unease in his chest pressed deeper. By mid-morning, the sky remained a muted grey, with no true sunrise to banish the lingering gloom. The ship's navigator, Elias Mercer, joined him on the bridge. Elias, a man of calm demeanour and seasoned eyes, carried with him a leather-bound logbook, the vessel's charting records since leaving San Juan. Julian welcomed the distraction, taking the offered book with a nod. "What's our bearing?" Julian asked softly. "Still steady, Captain. Due northeast, though." Elias hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly as he glanced at the compass affixed to the helm. Julian followed his gaze. The compass needle trembled, not wildly, but with a faint, persistent shiver. It seemed to quiver against some unseen force, tilting ever so slightly off true north before righting itself again. Julian watched in silence. "I checked the backup," Elias murmured, lowering his voice. "Same behaviour. She's fluctuating, but only by a fraction of a degree. Almost like something's pushing at the field," Julian finished quietly. They shared a glance, the kind two men exchanged when words proved inadequate. Julian closed the logbook gently. His fingers brushed over the worn leather, feeling the subtle imprint of countless journeys recorded upon its pages. Something felt wrong. not in the way of storms or mechanical failures, but in the marrow-deep sense a sailor develops after years upon the sea. Around midday, a dense fog rolled in, heavier and darker than any Julian had ever seen. It swallowed the ship in a matter of minutes, turning the vast Atlantic into a world of shifting shadows. The sea itself seemed to hush beneath it, the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull fading into an eerie, muffled silence. Visibility dropped to mere yards. The crew grew restless. Men moved with cautious steps, their voices subdued, as though afraid to disturb the unnatural quiet. Julian ordered the foghorn sounded, a deep, mournful bellow that rolled out into the grey. No echo answered. It was as though the fog swallowed the sound entirely, pulling it into its silent depths. Below decks, reports began to drift in, lights flickering, strange hums in the engine room, brief flashes of shadow caught in peripheral vision. A deckhand named Marlowe came forward pale-faced, swearing he had seen a figure standing at the stern, a tall silhouette unmoving against the fog. When approached, it vanished without a trace. Julian met with Elias again near the helm. "It's the Triangle," Elias whispered, his usual calm faltering. "I've heard the stories, strange disappearances, ships vanishing without a trace. But this feels like something more, like we're being watched." Julian said nothing. His hand rested upon the helm, feeling the subtle tremor beneath his fingertips, not from the ship's motion, but something deeper, an almost imperceptible vibration within the air itself. That night, the fog deepened into an oppressive shroud. The crew kept to their posts in tense silence, their lanterns casting soft, golden circles in the gloom. Around midnight, the strange tapping returned, this time louder, more distinct, a hollow knock against the steel hull, rhythmic and deliberate. It echoed along the ship's length, as though some unseen presence moved beside them in the dark. Julian descended to the deck alone, lantern in hand. He moved quietly, listening. The knock repeated, 3 times, then silence. He followed it along the port side, his boots sounding softly against the damp planks. As he neared the stern, the tapping came again, louder, sharper, before stopping altogether. He rounded the corner. There was nothing there. Only the endless fog swirling gently against the rails, and the faint, almost inaudible sound of water lapping against the hull. Julian's heart beat slow and heavy in his chest. He stared into the mist, his mind searching for reason. The wind shifted slightly, carrying with it a whisper. Not a voice, but a sound like breath against skin. A soft voice spoke, not from within the fog, but inside his mind. A single word stretched thin with haunting clarity. "Stay." "Ja!" Julian staggered back, his pulse surging. The lantern shook in his hand, its flame flickering wildly. He turned sharply, scanning the deck, the rails, the shadows, nothing. Only fog and the heavy silence of the night. By morning, the compass failed entirely. The needle spun in slow, lazy circles, refusing to settle. The radio crackled with static, no response from any frequency. The sea around them had fallen deathly calm, the fog unmoving, as if the ship floated within a glass globe of mist. The crew gathered near the bow, eyes wide with growing dread. Julian stood before them, trying to summon words that would steady the hearts of men long seasoned by the trials of the sea. But deep within, a quiet certainty took hold, a knowledge colder than fear itself. They were no longer sailing through the world they had known. The Bermuda Triangle had swallowed them whole. And whatever waited in the silent depths beyond the fog was only just beginning to wake. The morning pressed on with a silence so profound that it seemed to seep into the hearts of every soul aboard the Maribel Dawn. No breeze stirred the heavy fog. The water lay as a sheet of molten glass, unbroken even by the usual trailing wake of the ship. The engines, once a comforting hum beneath the feet of the crew, now sounded hollow, each mechanical beat reverberating with an uncanny echo that made men glance uneasily at the steel beneath them. Captain Julian Harrow stood at the bridge, one hand resting lightly on the unresponsive compass. Its needle spun in slow, ghostly circles, as though caught in an endless dance with forces unseen. Elias Mercer hovered nearby, his face pale beneath the dull glow of the oil lamp. The chart table lay before them, blank save for a single unfolding of their intended course, a course that now felt more a memory than a reality. "We should have seen the edge of the banks by now," Elias whispered, almost as though afraid to break the fragile stillness. "By my reckoning, we should be out of the Triangle's bounds." Julian said nothing. There was a sensation creeping upon him, not the dread of impending storm, nor the anxious anticipation of the unknown, but a slow, inexorable certainty that they were drifting deeper, farther into a realm no man's map could chart. The Bermuda Triangle did not simply swallow ships, it consumed reality itself. Below deck, the reports grew stranger. Crewmen spoke of shadows shifting against the bulkheads, of voices murmuring in empty passageways. A young sailor named Abram awoke screaming in his bunk, claiming he had felt hands pressing against his throat, cold, unseen hands that vanished when the lantern was lit. The engines began to emit a low, vibrating hum, a sound that seemed not mechanical but alive. Some claimed to hear faint whisperings woven into its rhythm, whispers that grew louder when one listened too closely. Julian called a meeting at midday. The crew assembled on the main deck, standing in tight clusters beneath the pale sky that showed no sun. Their faces bore the strain of sleepless hours, of the mounting weight of an unknown fear. Even the oldest sailors, men hardened by storms and the wrath of the sea, looked upon their captain with eyes that silently pleaded for sense, for reason, for something to anchor them to reality. Julian met each gaze steadily. "We're in calm waters," he began, his voice low and even. "No storm threatens us. The engines hold steady. We remain afloat. The fog is thick, yes, but it will pass. We keep our course, we maintain our duties, and we remain vigilant. That is how we survive this, together." The words sounded firm in the air, but even as he spoke them, Julian felt their hollowness. The fog did not behave like natural mist. It did not lift with the sun, did not stir with the breeze. It clung, thick and constant, as though it were a living thing wrapped around the ship. And worse still, by afternoon, the sea itself began to change. It started subtly, a soft, almost imperceptible shift beneath the hull. The water's reflection dulled, darkened. Men peering over the rails whispered that they saw no movement beneath, no swell of wave or flash of passing fish. Instead, a dark, endless abyss yawned beneath them, so still and black it felt less like water and more like the void itself. Julian ordered soundings taken. The weighted lines dropped into the depths, their descent measured carefully. Yet each time they were drawn back, the depth recorded was the same. No bottom, not shallow reefs, not continental shelf, but nothing, as though the ship floated above an infinite drop. Elias recorded the findings in the log, his hand shaking slightly as he wrote. "It's impossible," Elias whispered later, the words more a breath than a statement. "We should be over the seabed. Charts don't lie. There's always a flaw." Julian remained silent. That evening, the fog deepened once more into a pall of grey so thick it seemed almost solid. The lamps aboard ship cast small, shrinking circles of light, their glow swallowed before it could reach beyond a few paces. Men moved in wary silence. Meals went untouched. Conversations faded into wary glances and muttered prayers. And then the tapping returned. This time it came from below. A rhythmic, deliberate knock against the hull, like the measured beat of some unseen hand. The sound echoed through the steel, low and resonant, sending shivers through the deck beneath their feet. It started at the bow and slowly moved aft, tap, 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 steady, patient, deliberate. Julian and Elias stood at the helm, listening. "It's following the length of the ship," Elias murmured. Julian nodded once. He gave no order. What command could be given against the intangible, the unseeable? Instead, he stepped onto the deck, lantern in hand, and walked towards the stern, each footstep measured and quiet. Elias followed. As they reached the ship's rear, the tapping ceased. A cold wind stirred for the first time in hours, a faint, chilling breath that carried with it a low murmur, as though a chorus of distant voices hummed within the fog. The two men stood in silence, listening, their lanterns casting soft circles upon the wooden planks. And then they saw it. Beyond the stern rail, emerging from the heart of the mist, floated a shadow, tall, thin, humanoid in shape. It stood motionless upon the water's surface, cloaked in a veil of fog so thick its edges seemed to blur into nothingness. No face, no eyes, only the silhouette of something vaguely human. Watching, Julian's breath caught in his throat. The shadow raised a hand, long, thin fingers extending slowly, deliberately, and then, in the stillness of the fog, a voice spoke. Low, hollow, ancient. "Stay!" The word echoed not only in the air, but within Julian's mind, vibrating through the marrow of his bones. It was a command, not a request. Before either man could move, the shadow faded, melting back into the swirling mist without sound or ripple. Julian exhaled slowly, his heart thundering. Elias stood beside him, eyes wide, face pale. Neither spoke. The fog shifted once more, curling along the rails like reaching fingers. And in that moment, both men knew the Bermuda Triangle was no mere stretch of cursed sea. It was a threshold, and they had crossed it. Night fell over the Marabelle dawn with a silence so complete it seemed to swallow every sound before it could reach the air. The fog hung thick as ever, a soft shroud that wrapped the ship in a grey cocoon, casting the deck into a half-light that felt neither of night nor day. The crew moved in hushed murmurs, their footsteps soft against the planks, as though the weight of sound itself had grown too heavy to bear. Captain Julian Harrow remained on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the thick veil beyond the glass. Elias Mercer stood nearby, staring at the dead compass, the needle now perfectly still, pointing to nothing. The ship had drifted into a place where direction no longer held meaning. Below deck, the crew huddled in tense silence. Some muttered quiet prayers, others stared blankly at the walls, ears straining for the soft, deliberate tapping that had begun to haunt every corner of the ship. Though it came and went without pattern, it was always there, lurking beneath the hum of the engines, beneath the creak of wood and steel. Shortly after midnight, the whispering began again. It seeped through the bulkheads and along the corridors, a low, mournful sound like voices speaking in a language none could understand. The whispers slid over skin, curling around hearts with a chill that stirred something primal, something ancient. Men turned their heads toward empty doorways and shadowed corners, searching for the source, only to find nothing but the oppressive fog beyond the portholes. Julian felt it too. Standing alone at the helm, he heard it, a soft voice, close at his ear. Stay. He closed his eyes, taking a slow, measured breath. The word was no longer a command, it was a summons, a lure, a quiet, patient beckoning that pressed at the edges of the mind. At first light, or what passed for it in this eternal grey, Julian ordered the ship to reverse course. The engines rumbled to life, the screw turning slowly beneath the still water. The Marabelle Dawn began to glide backward, her bow turning toward what should have been open sea. But the fog remained unmoving. Hours passed, and yet the ship seemed to make no headway. The compass remained dead. The charts became useless parchment. Elias tried every bearing, every adjustment. The crew took turns at the helm, but the result was the same. No matter which direction they sailed, the fog remained constant, the surroundings unchanged. It was as though the triangle had become an endless loop, folding space around them. By midday, despair began to creep into the eyes of the men. One by one, sailors came forward with strange tales. A deckhand named Roscoe swore he saw his mother's face in the mist, her eyes hollow, mouth silently mouthing the word, "Stay." Another man, Garrett, claimed the ship's anchor chain rattled against something beneath the water, though the anchor had never been lowered. Most disturbing of all was the tale from young Abram. He came to Julian trembling, eyes wide with fear. "I saw myself, Captain," he whispered. "On the deck, I saw myself walking toward me, same face, same clothes, same everything. I watched, and then it smiled." Julian said nothing. His heart grew heavy, not with fear, but with a grim and a cold acceptance. They were not facing a storm, nor a creature of the deep. What surrounded them was something beyond human comprehension, a force that mirrored, that whispered, that twisted the mind itself. That night, the Marabelle Dawn ceased her motion entirely. Despite the engines running at full, the ship simply refused to move. The wheel spun uselessly under the hands of the helmsman. The ship floated upon an unmoving sea imprisoned within a silent fog. And then, just before midnight, the singing began. Soft, low, sweet. A woman's voice carrying across the deck in a haunting melody that sent a chill crawling along every spine. The song came from nowhere and everywhere. It drifted from the fog, from the steel beneath their feet, from the very air itself. A song without words, a lullaby of endless yearning. Men gathered on deck, drawn by the sound. Julian stood among them, staring into the mist. Shapes began to form. At first faint, wisps within the fog, like shadows behind thin veils. Then clearer, more distinct. Figures walking slowly across the water toward the ship. Men, women, children. Their features pale and blurred, their eyes empty voids. They moved in silence, drawn by the song. The crew watched in frozen horror as the figures reached the hull, their hands pressing against the steel sides. Faces emerged from the mist, gazing upward, lips moving softly in time with the song. Elias stood beside Julian, his face ashen. This isn't real," Elias whispered, but Julian knew better. The figures did not climb aboard, they simply watched, their forms swaying gently as though carried on some unseen tide, and then as one they raised their hands, pale fingers pointing directly at the men standing upon the deck. The song ceased. For a heartbeat, silence fell, thick and suffocating, and then came the voice, not whispered, but clear, strong, ancient. "Stay." The word echoed across the water, through the fog and into the hearts of every man aboard. Julian felt his body freeze, every muscle locked in place. The air pressed upon his chest, cold and suffocating. The world seemed to slow, the fog curling tighter, the shadows closing in, and then, just as suddenly, the figures vanished. The song faded into the silence. Julian gasped, sucking in a cold breath as the weight upon him lifted. Around him the crew staggered back, their eyes wide with silent terror. But deep within, Julian knew. This was not a warning, it was a promise. They were no longer mere travellers lost within a cursed stretch of sea. They had become part of it. The night following the silent visitation was the longest the men aboard the Maribel Dawn had ever known. Though the watches changed with clockwork precision and the ship's lamps burned in every corridor, a strange sense of timelessness swallowed every hour. The darkness pressed in from all sides, as if the fog had thickened into a black veil that stifled the very heartbeat of the vessel. Captain Julian Harrow sat alone at the chart table in the wheelhouse, the open logbook before him filled with notes that seemed meaningless now. The last recorded position, the notations of drifting course corrections, and the inked compass headings, all useless fragments of a reality they had long since departed. His hand hovered over the page, quill unmoving. A soft knock echoed at the door. Julian did not turn. He already knew the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps was not from any crewman. It came again, steady, patient, waiting. Julian closed the logbook quietly and stood. He walked to the door, opened it. There was nothing. Only the swirling fog curling just beyond the threshold, moving with a slow, serpentine grace. It parted gently as though making room for him to step beyond. But Julian remained where he stood. Behind him he heard Elias' voice, a low whisper from the far side of the cabin. "Don't answer it." Julian turned his head slightly. Elias stood near the helm, his eyes fixed on the doorway, his face pale as porcelain. Julian nodded once, closing the door with slow, steady hands. He did not lock it. Some things he knew could not be barred by wood and iron. By dawn, or what passed for it, the ship's power began to falter. The lights flickered, the engines groaned, and the gentle hum that had once been the heartbeat of the Maribel Dawn faded into a stuttering, dying whisper. The radio emitted nothing but a low, constant static. Elias stood at the helm, his hands tightening on the wheel. Julian watched him, noting the tremor in the man's fingers. "We're adrift," Elias whispered, "and yet we do not move." Julian said nothing, because it was true. Despite every natural law of sea and wind, the ship remained motionless, caught within a bubble of stillness. The ocean below no longer moved. The fog did not drift. The air remained dead. And then the crew began to vanish. It happened slowly at first. One man missing from his bunk, his belongings left untouched. Another gone from the galley, his cup of tea still warm upon the table. No sound, no struggle. They simply ceased to be. By the end of the first day, 5 men were gone. The rest gathered at the bow in silent vigil, eyes scanning the mist, waiting for shapes to emerge. None did. The fog remained empty, still watching. Julian stood before them, his voice low, his words measured. "We stay together. No one wanders alone. We remain on open deck where all can see." The men nodded. They obeyed, but the fear in their eyes was unmistakable. Elias approached Julian as the sun sank beneath the grey. "It's taking them," Elias murmured, "one by one." Julian met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "I know." They stood in silence for a long moment, the sound of the sea absent beneath them. That night, Julian posted a constant watch. Men sat back to back on the deck, lanterns glowing softly in a ring of golden light. They spoke little, clinging to the fragile safety of numbers, but it changed nothing. By morning, 3 more were gone. No cries, no struggle, The men had simply vanished, as though the fog itself had swallowed them whole. Elias's hand trembled as he marked their names in the ledger. "I can't do this," he whispered. We can't fight shadows. We can't resist whatever this is." Julian placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "We will endure," Julian said, voice soft but unwavering. "We will hold on." But even as he spoke, Julian felt the creeping doubt winding its way through his heart. By the following night, only half the crew remained. Those left moved as shadows of their former selves, silent, hollow-eyed, clinging together in a desperate circle on the upper deck. They did not sleep. They did not speak. They simply waited. And in the waiting, the shadows came. Not figures this time, not whispers, but shapes that moved within the fog, tall, indistinct forms pacing silently along the ship's rails. Their outlines pulsed faintly with a soft, bluish glow, like phantoms of light in the mist. They did not approach. They did not speak. They watched. And every few hours, a man would fall asleep and vanish before the eyes of the others. The silence that followed each disappearance was worse than the vanishing itself. Julian remained at the helm, standing with Elias at his side, both men armed with nothing but their resolve. The crew clustered close, their faces drawn with exhaustion and mounting dread. The fog pulsed gently around them, breathing in silent rhythm. And then, in the deep of the night, the singing returned. Soft, sweet, haunting. It came from the mist, curling around the ship like a lover's embrace. The song reached into the hearts of the men, soothing, lulling, calling. Eyes grew heavy, heads bowed. Elias shook his head violently, clenching his fists. "No, no, fight it, fight it." Julian's heart pounded as the melody pressed against his mind, soft and insistent. "Stay." The word drifted within the song, woven through the haunting melody. One by one, the men sank to their knees. Julian fought against the weight upon his chest, the fog pressing closer, whispering, promising rest, peace, surrender. And then, from the depths of the fog, a figure stepped forward. A woman, her form pale and shifting, her face veiled in shadow. Her eyes met Julian's, deep and endless. She spoke one word: "Stay." Julian felt his legs weaken, his vision blur, but somewhere deep within a spark remained, a faint, stubborn ember. He met her gaze. He did not speak. He clenched his fists. The figure smiled softly, her form dissolving into the mist. The song faded, and with it the night passed into a grey, silent dawn. But the Maribel dawn remained trapped, caught in the hands of a mystery no man could name. And Julian Harrow, captain of a ship lost beyond the veil of the known world, stood defiant, yet unbearably alone. The grey dawn broke over the Maribel dawn, with a hush so deep it pressed upon the men like a physical weight. Only 8 souls remained aboard, including Captain Julian Harrow and Elias Mercer. The rest had vanished, taken silently by the shadows, swallowed by the insatiable mist that had become their prison. The sea beneath them remained a flawless mirror of black, unmoving, reflecting the ship as though frozen in time. The fog swirled lazily along the rails, no longer rushing in with hunger, but instead hanging with a patient expectancy, like a living thing that knew its prey would soon fall. Julian stood at the prow, hands gripping the cold rail, his eyes scanning the endless veil of mist ahead. His face was gaunt, the hollows beneath his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness, but his gaze remained sharp, a silent defiance that flickered quietly against the consuming fear that gnawed at his heart. Beside him, Elias leaned heavily on the rail, his breath shallow. "They're coming for us all," Elias whispered, "one by one, until none are left." Julian nodded slowly. "I know." A long silence followed, 2 men standing at the edge of a world unmade, their ship a fragile island of steel amid an ocean of shadows. Below decks, the remaining crew huddled in tight groups, their voices reduced to murmurs. Some clutched talismans, others muttered prayers. A few sat in stunned silence, eyes fixed on nothing, waiting for the inevitable. That morning the fog shifted. It peeled apart in long, slow ribbons, revealing glimpses of something vast beneath the surface of the sea. Julian watched in cold stillness as shapes moved beneath the water, massive, indistinct, gliding shadows that passed silently below the hull. Their forms pulsed with faint blue luminescence, coiling and turning like leviathans of the deep. Elias saw them too. "What are they?" Elias whispered. Julian said nothing. He watched as the shadows circled the ship, gliding in slow, measured arcs, like wolves stalking a wounded prey. They did not rise. They did not break the surface. They merely circled, waiting. By midday, the remaining crewmen began to fall asleep. One by one, despite every effort to stay awake, their heads sank, their bodies folding gently as though succumbing to some unseen hand pressing them down. And when they did, when their eyes closed, they simply ceased to be. No sound, no warning, no trace. Julian stood helpless as a man named Brenner collapsed beside him on the deck. He reached for the man's shoulder, a desperate instinct, but the body dissolved beneath his touch, vanishing into a thin wisp of mist. Elias clenched his fists, biting down a cry of despair. "They want us sleeping," Elias gasped. "That's when they take us, when we surrender." Julian's voice was soft, "Yes." And so as the sun hovered low upon the horizon, though no warmth or light pierced the endless fog, Julian made his decision. They would not sleep. They would not surrender. He gathered the remaining men, only 6 now, and ordered them to the bow. They stood in a tight circle, shoulder to shoulder, lanterns held high. The faint glow formed a fragile bubble of light in the growing dusk. Julian stood at the center. "We stand together," he said quietly. "Eyes open, hands linked. We hold on until the end." The men nodded, their faces tight with fear but lit with a flicker of resolve. Elias took Julian's hand, the others joined, forming a ring of locked hands, one fragile human chain against the vast unknown. As night fell, the fog stirred once more. The shadows returned. They came without warning, gliding soundlessly through the mist, tall, thin figures with hollow eyes and hands like pale branches. They moved slowly, deliberately, circling the ring of men, their forms shifting and blurring with every step. Julian met their gaze. He held on. The figures reached out with long, slender fingers, their touch passing over the men like a cold wind. But the circle did not break. The men stood firm, hands locked, hearts pounding. And then the singing began again. Soft, sweet, haunting. The melody wove through the air, wrapping around their hearts, pressing upon their minds like a velvet glove. One of the men, a young sailor named Harlan, sagged forward. Julian's grip tightened on his hand. "Hold," Julian whispered. Harlan shuddered, his knees buckling. The shadows pressed closer, and then Harlan's head dropped, his body going limp. He vanished in a wisp of fog, his hands slipping from Julian's grasp like smoke. The circle tightened. 5 remained. Julian clenched his jaw, his body trembling as the song swelled around them, a chorus of voices now, soft and inviting. "Stay!" The word echoed within their minds, a command, a lullaby, a promise of peace. Elias grunted softly, sweat pouring from his brow as his grip locked tighter around Julian's hand. "We hold." Julian's voice was a hoarse whisper. The figures moved closer, their hands brushing against the men's shoulders, their hollow eyes peering deep into their souls. The fog thickened, pressing against their skin, against their hearts. And still, they held on. One by one, the shadows reached for them, and found no weakness. The song rose, pleading, haunting, beautiful. And still, they did not break. Until at last, the shadows stopped. They stood in silent ranks around the circle of men, unmoving, and then they began to fade. One by one, the figures dissolved into mist, their forms unraveling like threads pulled by an unseen hand. The song ceased. The fog lifted, and for the first time in days, the sea stirred. A gentle ripple lapped against the hull of the Maribel Dawn. Julian gasped for air, his knees trembling beneath him. The men around him, only 4 now, stood in stunned silence, eyes wide. The fog rolled back, retreating across the water, pulling away in long, thin strands. And beyond it, the open sea waited. The sun broke through at last, a soft golden glow upon the horizon. Julian released Elias's hand. The silence was broken only by the soft whisper of the waves. They had endured. But the price, the memory, the scars, would remain forever. The Bermuda Triangle had let them go, for now. The dawn that greeted the survivors of the Maribel Dawn was unlike any they had known before. The grey veil of mist that had clung so long and so fiercely to the ship finally broke apart, dissolving into soft tendrils that drifted lazily across the widening horizon. The sun rose in solemn majesty, casting a pale golden light upon the calm waters, turning the sea into a mirror of liquid fire. Captain Julian Harrow stood at the helm, the gentle morning breeze tugging softly at his worn coat. His hands rested upon the wheel, still silent, his eyes fixed on the endless expanse before him. Around him, only 4 remained. Elias Mercer and 3 seamen who stared out over the water with the hollow, uncertain gaze of men who had glimpsed something no human should ever see. The Bermuda Triangle had released them. Or so it seemed. The ship moved once more, her engines humming with a soft, steady rhythm that felt almost unfamiliar after days of haunting stillness. The compass, long dead, trembled slightly before settling upon a true bearing, its needle pointing northward with hesitant resolve. Elias stood beside Julian, his face drawn but steady. "We're free," Elias whispered, though the words hung in the air with a hollow weight. Julian nodded slowly. The sea stretched out before them, open and vast, the sky above a soft tapestry of morning clouds. There was no sign of the figures that had haunted them, no shadow moving within the waves, no whisper in the wind. It was as though the world itself had been washed clean. Yet deep within Julian's heart, something remained. A presence. A memory. A knowing. They had not escaped. They had been allowed to leave. The difference lay in the quiet chill that settled along his spine, the sense that the Bermuda Triangle was not merely a place upon the earth, but a living, sentient force, patient and watchful. It had reached out to them, toyed with them, studied them, and in the end, spared them, for reasons they would never comprehend. The survivors set to their duties with mechanical hands, checking the lines, inspecting the engines, ensuring the course held true. They moved like shadows upon the deck, speaking little, their eyes wary of every ripple upon the water, every faint whisper of wind. By noon, land appeared upon the horizon, a low, dark smudge that resolved slowly into the distant shores of Bermuda itself. The island emerged with gentle certainty, its silhouette crowned by soft hills and scattered groves of palm, a vision of the world they had known, the world they feared they would never see again. A cheer did not rise. No voices broke the silence. They merely watched, their hearts tight, their hands clenched. As the Maribel dawn drew closer to the harbour, the radio crackled to life. A voice, clear, human, mundane, spoke through the static. "Maribel Dawn, this is Bermuda Port Authority. Please confirm identity and condition." Over. Elias stared at the radio for a long, frozen moment before reaching out, his fingers trembling. This is the Maribel Dawn. We are returning from San Juan. Crew reduced. Vessel intact." A pause. "Copy that, Maribel Dawn. Proceed to berth. We'll have a medical team standing by." Elias lowered the radio, exhaling a breath that shook softly from his chest. They were back. Yet nothing felt real. The ship moved steadily into the harbour, passing fishing boats and leisure craft that glided upon the morning waters as though the world remained unchanged. The people upon those decks waved, oblivious to the silent terror that clung to the hull of the freighter, to the ghosts that lingered in the eyes of its crew. When they docked, men in crisp uniforms came aboard, their faces marked with polite concern. Doctors, harbour masters, port officials, they asked questions, offered blankets, guided them ashore. But the answers Julian gave were few, and the story he told was simple. Engine trouble, compass failure, a storm, a lost crew claimed by the sea. The officials accepted the words, noting them in their reports, shaking their heads with solemn sympathy. They had heard such tales before. The Triangle had its reputation, after all. And who would question a survivor's account when the ocean's mysteries were so well known, so easily dismissed with a shrug and a knowing look? But Julian knew. So did Elias, and the 4 men who remained. They knew the truth. On the evening of their arrival, Julian sat alone upon the harbour wall, watching the sun sink into the western horizon. The air smelled of salt and distant rain, the breeze soft upon his face. Elias joined him, silent for a time. Finally, Elias spoke. "We made it," Julian nodded, "for now." Elias turned his gaze to the sea. "You think it'll come for us again?" Julian's eyes remained fixed on the far-off line where sky met water. "I think it never really lets go." The 2 men sat together in the deepening dusk, bound by a silent understanding, a knowledge that they were marked, that something beyond the veil of reality had brushed against them and left its mark upon their souls. The world moved on. The harbour bustled. The ships came and went, the tides rolled in and out with patient grace, but in the quiet places of the heart, in the soft hours of the night when dreams drift close and shadows press near, Julian knew the truth would return, the voice, the song, the soft endless whisper of the deep. Stay. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the Bermuda Triangle waited, watching, waiting, always.